if you want to free stuff, you're getting traction. So
So that's on command.
it's on command.
Okay.
Okay. Mine and ask the listing agent, just say, hey, do you mind if I?
Oh, here we go.
come over
We're
on
back.
Facebook? And I'll be like, sure, but they
Are you
just
zooming it?
know
Yep.
that you're.
Okay,
Put it
I'll
out
let
there.
Catherine know. She wanted to know.
Yeah, cool.
I try to do.
Yep, we're zooming it.
Let's Try to clean up my language.
Like.
Yeah, I'm gonna record it too, but
Photo that you can put out there.
You're all set.
You know, just.
Do you need
Should have
another
an
contract?
automatic bleeper on it, is what they should have, so I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Did you have enough
enough?
Did you have enough contracts?
And
Huh?
I
Did you have
couldn't get
enough
it to
contracts?
post. with
I need
that.
one.
And I'm
One
like,
more?
I'm not-
Yeah, I'll print
Send somebody down with one.
Yeah,
So
I'll
I
print one.
just succumbed.
Yeah, and just ask somebody that. you-
Yeah. Yeah, cause I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. oh, I'm
Is it
sure.
live now?
Yep, you're
My name, Holly.
Jenny,
That's
Pace.
right. I know, I saw it.
I know, not me too. I know. I'm like,
So was today your first day?
good. I just wanna check something.
I knew someone, a couple of people were, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And you can use the mouse if you want to.
Huh?
You can use the mouse if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay, you're good.
I was just gonna say, I need to.
Yeah. Yeah, my.
There are snacks over here if you guys do get hungry. There's candy and granola bars.
That was really good. I was just complaining because I didn't have a donut. All right, we're in contract class. What are you doing way back there?
Because I'll have to sneak out at some point, so I didn't
Okay,
want
you can leave anytime you want to.
to.
I mean, I have a boy in school, and if we went that long, I'd have to go, but he's got fun facts and fictions after school today, so I don't have to leave early. I always start this class the same thing. We're gonna be talking about the residential cell contract. We'll go through it. It doesn't go very fast. No offense, I apologize. There's just a lot to cover in there. After we get to page 4, then it kind of speeds up because then that's just junk from the attorneys, a lot of it. And it can be covered with 1 or 2 sentences and you just jump through it. So the key thing is on a contract though, is you're just filling in blanks. So you don't have to be smart, which is obvious on my side of the deal. You just don't have to be real intelligent. You just have to be able to paraphrase what you're doing for your client and understand why you're doing it. So I always tell people to, you remember when you were a kid, some of you not that long ago, if you went to Bible study in church, if you ever went to church, you know, you have to learn Bible verses. You don't have to know the whole darn thing. You just got to be able to paraphrase, right? You know, that's how you have to do it. Or if you've ever gone to class anywhere and you've got to regurgitate information for a multiple choice test, it's kind of like that. That's what it is. But you have to have a general idea what you're talking about. So that's what we try to do in the contract class, is get you to that point. Don't ever be afraid to write a contract. If you get an opportunity, you haven't written one yet, sit down and write it. First one I ever wrote was with this doctor, first client, friend of mine, ear, nose, and throat surgeon. And we sat down to write the contract and I said, listen, I've never done this before. I said, so we're gonna go through it line by line. 3 hours it took to write a contract. And I think it was only 6 pages back then maybe, but it was painful. After that, I learned the contract a little better. But I was with Remax at the time, and they charged us 25 cents per page for a contract.
Wow.
So I didn't want to get one out of a drawer just to have it, you know. Been a long time. We didn't have the digital stuff back then. The other thing I always like to tell people when they get in here, especially if they're new, is you really only have one job in real estate when it comes to it. And that really is lead generation. I know we harp on it all the dang time. But I was harping on it with, that's for me.
Oh, for you?
Yeah.
You know the contract.
I know, but I just like to flip through it. every
Here's
once
some
in a while.
extras. just in case.
Thanks. But even when I first started, it was the same thing, only different. I started in 1996 full time. And I've been, drove truck, and then I was in, I taught for 10 years, and then I was in the restaurant business after that for 10 years, and then I got into real estate. But I realized within about the first 2 months, even though I didn't have any education in real estate other than what you did, go to class, you know, if I'm gonna do anything, I'm gonna have to generate some opportunities to do stuff. So you have to figure that part out first. And your sphere of influence is obviously the first place you go. I wish I'd had command all those years ago, because I had to go knock on doors and holler at people and chase them around and things like that. But if you'll use command from the beginning, learn how to use it, put your people in there, put your entire database in there, and then assign a plan to them so that you're staying in contact, whether you may actually make a physical phone call or something like that, you're gonna be so much further ahead than most agents. But then the other thing is, you really need to let your sphere of influence know that you're in real estate. Because if your mama buys a house through somebody else, it's gonna be a bad deal. And they will, you know, sisters, uncles, nieces, brothers, people in your social group, you know. You consider them your best friend or a close friend or something, all of a sudden they go, "Oh, I bought a house." Like, you know, that's not how it's supposed to happen. So you've got to do that early on. And the easiest way is command, to use that in the database. Second thing is, make sure that you let that group, whether it's 10 people that are close to you, or 20, or 50, or 100, let them know. Write them a personal note, include your new business card. Say, I've made a change in my life. You know, I just want you to be aware of it. Anything you can do for me is great. Doesn't have to be, you know, 3 paragraphs. It's just, you know, here I am. I just want you to know. And the other thing is, there are opportunities out there like open houses, which are a great opportunity. Even if you don't sell the house or if you don't collect a buyer, you're practicing. You know, you're practicing using scripts, you're practicing, how do I respond to this question when it's asked? What else should I have known about this property before I sat there in an open house or took it on? The worst thing you do is go to an open house in a neighborhood that you don't know and go in there, and the first question is, do they have an HOA? Like, oh, okay. I don't know, but I'll find out. You know, a lot of kids in the neighborhood. I don't know, but I'll find out. I mean, you know, those questions, it's okay. It's better to say that than, oh yeah, there's hundreds of kids. If you're lying, you know, they'll come back to you. But you need to know those things. Also, expireds will come back at some point. Those are listings that went on the market and didn't sell. And one of the reasons they should come back is because we went through that pricing escalation and a lot of them got overpriced. And now the market with the interest rates up and everything, prices are starting to settle. So they may be available. And if expired's available, that's the best thing ever. Here's the script. Hi, I see that your house expired today. It's no longer on the market. Okay. You can call them. That's not against the rules. And blah, blah, blah. Well, you're the 20th agent to call me today. Yeah. Isn't it a shame because there's 2,000 plus agents here? Only 20 of us care whether your house sells or not. Okay. And then I tell you what, if you'll give me 15 minutes at your house, I can tell you why your house didn't sell. And you can, you know, it's probably what? Price. Yeah, price is one. Because price dictates everything to who your buyer is going to be. Location, though, you know, it could be on the corner of National and Sunshine. Hopefully not. You have to go to planning and zoning meetings. It could be condition. You walk in and they got 3 big dogs and there's one pile of poop over there and one pile. I mean, you can just, and me, whenever I've done expireds, I've always said the same thing. I'm going to be honest with you. I just want you to know that up front about your house. Okay. And so that's all you do. And in 15 minutes, you could tell them. And then the second part is to sell yourself. Or hopefully if you're being a professional and you've got documents and things like that to support what you're saying, whether it's price, or whatever it is, then you can sell yourself. The other one, they're for sale by owners. I love for sale by owners because they think they know the market, but they don't know the market. We don't even disclose prices in the state of Missouri. So their neighbor said they sold for 500,000 and they actually sold for 320. They don't know that unless you provide them with the data. But I've always, a good simple script for sale by owners is, you know, I saw your house, you know, saw the sign, thought I'd give you a call. You know, you mind if I stop by and look at it? I work with buyers. I don't have a specific buyer. Don't ever lie and say I've got a buyer for your house. I work with buyers all across the area. And if I can see your house, you know, maybe I can bring a buyer to you. And so when you get there, you know, obviously you're professional. I would have a CMA, if it was me, a comparative market analysis to say what I think the house value is. And then you say, you know what? Jim Boland, blah, blah, blah. How you doing? House is mine. Why don't you show me the house the way you'd show a buyer? They love that, you know. Got high efficiency countertops, you know, things like that. But you ask two questions while you're there. Okay, and for sale by owner, always ask two questions. And your questions are the buyers that have looked at the house, were they pre-qualified? And so he goes, well, what do you mean? That's what they'll say. Because they don't ask. You're gonna ask somebody about their finances that just stopped off the street? You typically don't. So are they pre-qualified? And I say, well, what do you mean? And you say, as an agent, we pre-qualify buyers two ways. One, we want to make sure they're able to afford your property before we ever show it to them. We're not going to put them in a car, drag them to your house, and drag them through your house if they're not pre-qualified financially to buy your house. Secondly, we're going to qualify them as to needs and wants. I mean, your house is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Why would I bring a family of 4 here unless they tell me they can live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home? I want it to be, you know, something that fits their needs. And if they say, I want a 4-bedroom home with 2 baths and a big yard, there's no reason for me to bring them to your house, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. And I said, every agent does that. And so, you know, have you been doing that? They can lie and say yes. But the point is, you're showing them value right there. You're saying, look at me, I'm valuable. This is what I do before we ever get there. But those are 3 or 4 ways that you can generate leads, and you want to generate as many leads as you can. But I will tell you this, don't fall into the trap of putting up a billboard or buying into some system that generates thousands of leads a day or a week or whatever it is. How many leads do you actually need per week to be successful in this business? One. Because if you could create or generate 1 good lead per week, 1 good one, not 20 that are, you know, they're just out there smelling the market, you know. 1 good lead, that's 52 transactions. You can't handle that anyway, right? You really can't, unless you hire an assistant. So just think about it. Now, if your life or how many have kids? Okay. If your life or your kid's life depended on you generating a lead this week, could you do it? Damn right you could. You would too. If you had to stand on the corner of National and Primrose and hand out business cards until somebody says, hey, I'll buy a house from you. You'd do it if it depended. Well, when I got in, they said, I went to some class that I paid for thousands of dollars. They said, you need to know what your why is. And so I had 2 pictures of my kids sitting on my computer every day. When I decided it was time to go home and I look at those kids, I think, I can make 1 more call, you know, because that was my why. So you got to determine what your why is. One of my favorites, we've got an agent here in the company. I'll leave her name out of it. She joined us when we were at Carol Jones. And I said, you know, I think you're going to be really successful, because she was very straightforward, had a great personality, but had a business background, kind of knew stuff. And she says, all I want to do is buy extra furniture or new furniture for my house and go on vacation once a year. And I said, I think you're going to do better than that. That was 15 years ago. She's killing it. She probably does 10 million a year every year, whether she tries or not. Point is, that was her why at the time. It worked out a little better for her than that. But you've got to determine that. So, yeah.
With the leads, I know in the Tuesday meetings, the legal stuff, like, can you go and door knock around your own neighborhood? There's no legal, you're not gonna get in trouble legally
That's
if you
fine.
door knock.
Yeah, and you can, in that case too, you can just say, hey, you know what? I just got into real estate. I'm working with one of the top companies in the area. They're one of the top training, they are the top training real estate company in the nation. You know, if they ask you about your experience, because I had that when I started too, people would say, you know, you ran a restaurant. I said, yeah, but I'm with one of the best companies, you know, they got all this training, which was a lie. It was RE/MAX. But anyhow, But that's what you do, and you should do that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And you can just hand them your business card. Because they say, well, you know, I work with
Yeah.
Joe Blow. So, you know what? Great agent. I always say they're great agents, whether they are or not, but it's a nice thing to say.
Okay.
And then you kind of eliminate that, or if they say, you know, I don't want you soliciting here. You know, I apologize. I just wanted to make sure you knew that you had somebody that in the neighborhood that cares about the neighborhood that, you know, could work for you if you needed it. And go to the next one.
Cause they said that like there's an agent that kind of has this neighborhood and I was like, well, that's kind of weird. So. Yeah.
I still remember, well, I've been in it too long, but I've heard that from
Okay.
people
I
before
just
too.
didn't wanna,
So-and-so
like,
is
start-
the,
Yeah.
is the agent for this neighborhood. And I'm like, not anymore, you know?
Okay, so there's
mean-
nothing legally that would.
Oh, no, because competition's the best thing. I mean, even if it's a great agent, there still could be competition there, you know? Can I do a better job than this agent, you know? Would you rather work with me, this agent? The agent I was thinking about, he was just a total butt. I mean, he's just real hard-headed and had no personality. And I just thought, you know, why would you work with him when you could work with me?
Mhm.
You know, nothing, I mean, not being cocky, it's just I knew the guy. I thought, I don't even like talking to him, so I don't know why you want to work with the guy. And he was tough to deal with all the time. So, and I never tried to take over a neighborhood, so I shouldn't say that I went in to take over one. I just thought that there'd be better opportunities for the sellers in there if they worked with me than they would for him.
Right.
That's an opinion. You got to believe in yourself, you know? The other thing, if you're going to be listing properties in command, there are tons of marketing information. You really need to get a simple listing presentation together. Simple, listen to me, okay? A simple listing presentation. So it's got a cover page and then it's got the basic information about selling a house. Real basic, trim it down. Have somebody review it, and if it's too much, got too much, then take it out. All you want to be able to insert in there is a CMA. After, you know, so you can use the same one over and over and over and over. But a simple listing presentation that you can bring with you to a listing to say, you know, here's basically the steps we take to sell your home. Now, here's what a seller really wants to know. How much, right? How long? Who's going to take care of the problems? Is it going to be easy, or am I going to have to deal with this? I don't let my clients deal with anything unless they just insist that they've got to be involved. So how much, how long, and I'll take care of the problems. You don't have to worry about anything. The only reason I'll contact you is if there's an issue that I can't handle. And I think if you take that approach to it, then you're potentially the clients are going to see value right there because they don't want to mess with it. They think sign in the yard, you know, you just drive around in a pretty car and wear nice clothes, and then the next thing you know, it's sales. I mean, you just don't know how much work goes into it to get it done from one end to the other. Let me show you this right now. Let me see here. No, I don't have to do that. But one file we've got going right now, 3121 East Alpine in Southern Hills. I think we got 35 documents in it, you know? You know, lender stuff, title company stuff, repair invoices and so on. All that's in there, inspections and so on. And, you know, so we get it under contract. Sometimes that's the easy part. And then the rest of it's all hidden until you get to the end and you get paid. And the other thing to remember, people will complain about commissions every once in a while. And I always tell them, I'm the last person that gets paid. Once everything's done, then the title company will provide a check to the brokerage, and the brokerage will take theirs if they're taking it, if you're not capped, and then I get mine. I'm the last person. So, you know, I understand you're concerned about commission, but you know, you're getting something special here, and you're getting value, and you're being protected the whole way. All right, we'll talk about a contract now. Residential sale contract. They change these every once in a while, every couple of years, and we had a couple changes this year that weren't major, nothing that you should be concerned about. The first thing is, notice it says buyer and the undersigned seller. You used to have a line where you identify the seller too. That went away a couple of years ago because the attorneys decided at the state of Missouri that, look, you're just selling a property. That's it. That's what it is. It's a property. So all you got to do is identify the address. You don't have to identify the seller on the first page of the contract. Notice in this, it says Thomas C. Marcel. He's just a client of ours, past client. So that's your sphere of influence deal. And this is just on the board, but you've got your page down there too. If you wanted to be really smart, you could put ASP there, which would be a single person. That would tell the title company immediately when they receive the contract that this is a single person, don't have a wife involved anywhere, husband or anything. As a buyer, you can buy a house all by yourself, even if you're married. But as a seller, you have to have both parties, right? Yes, you learned that in real estate school, unless you have a marital waiver of rights. The other thing on buyer, it could be 6 people. And we're seeing that right now on the sell side quite a bit because the baby boomers are dying. No offense, that's one of me. But they are, and so when they die, they leave their property, their kids, and sometimes they have 3 kids with 3 wives or 3 kids with 3 husbands. And so we end up with 6 sellers on that line if this is a sales contract where we're listing something. But it could be the same thing on a buyer too. We've got a property out in Willow Springs we've had under contract for 15 months now that hasn't closed yet. That has 8 people that have to sign every document. Thank God for electronic signatures, right? But it's kind of a pain. The other thing is the buyer can be an entity. So my own personal corporation is Kelby Lane Inc. So I could put Kelby Lane Inc. up in that line. The key is that when I get down to the signature page, it has to be signed by somebody with blood. You know, it can't be an entity. And we get this all the time, especially on investment properties where the entity wants to sign. You know, Smith Homes LLC, you can't do that. You can identify them under the signature, but it has to be a real person that signs. So if a corporation or something buys, an entity buys a property, a trust buys a property, then you'll need a copy of those documents. Just remember that. You'll need a copy of their incorporation documents or whatever it might be to make sure that the right person is signing that's allowed to sign. Okay, everybody good? All right. All right, so the property here is identified as 218 North Forest Avenue. Now, make sure that you have either avenue, street, route, whatever else is out there. If it's a government loan, and this will be a government loan on this, because if they check it, which they do the last week before you close the transaction, and you've got that wrong, that modifier, then it could cause the contract not to close. So you got to make sure you get it right. My daughter lives on 2048 South Valley Road Avenue, or Avenue Road. I can't ever remember, but it's really stupid. And so you can't ever get anybody to deliver anything because they can't find it. But if you're going to do this, make sure you get that right. And then we've got our city, and then on Missouri, we've got the correct zip code and the county. Now up above that on line 4, it asks about, do you want to put the municipality name in there? Murney, for some reason, thinks you put the name of the city in there. It's not real. That's not a incorporation, you know, a municipality. We're actually a city. So, but if they ask you to, this happens, you're under contract, they say, hey, you need to put the city there. Just write the city in. Don't argue with them. Just put it in there, okay? And if you want to put it in there every time, you're okay. Check boxes, legal description is attached. We don't do that anymore. I mean, we used to all the time. I still include, and you'll see this. Now, when you go in to look at a listing, if you're new, when you look at the listing on the top, it'll say CRS tax info. If I'm making an offer on a property, I want to click that and print it. I want to see that tax info just to make sure address is correct and things like that. I don't care what the city thinks its value is or anything like that. I just want to have that. But it also shows a diagram of the plat, right? Have you looked at any of those yet? Okay. It's got a diagram of the plat, whether it's just a lot, it's 50 by 150 or what it is, it's right there. And I think that's important for my client to see and know if they haven't seen it yet, because you can't just stand at the street and look at something and say, okay, this looks like that's how it's shaped. So I always include that in mind, but it's not a legal description. right? When would you include a legal description? If it's a meets and bounds purchase, and they've got the full legal description, then you want to put that in there. Or if there's a survey available, you'll want to include that in your offer. So you check the box, and then all parties to the contract then would initial whatever document you include. Okay? Number 2, inclusions and exclusions. This gets you in trouble faster than anything else. The property includes, but it's not limited to, all of the following, if any, which are now located on the real estate, all of which seller warrants to convey to buyer free and clear at closing. In other words, if I've got a range and it's attached to the wall, I'm saying it's free and clear. I'm not making payments on it. But note this contract, that document, and not a seller's disclosure statement, where the seller may put on their refrigerator, 4 garage door openers, whatever. MLS detail sheet or other promotional material provide for what is included in the sale. Here's the problem, and you've seen it already, even if you didn't know it. Here's a house being sold. You know, they got a picture of this grand kitchen with this huge island, and it's got the wine bar underneath and all that, okay? Also, there's that 2-door French refrigerator that costs $4,000, really nice one, right? It's not included in the sale. I don't care how many pictures of it's on the internet or on the MLS, it's not part of the sale. I don't care if they mark it on the disclosures and say refrigerator, it's not for sale. If you want the refrigerator for your clients, or your clients want the refrigerator, then it has to go on line 18. And it should be this: kitchen, refrigerator at no value. The at no value is because the lenders want that in there because they say they're not going to loan money on a refrigerator, which is stupid. They're loaning money on dishwashers and microwaves and everything else, but they say that. So we put that in there at no value. But you put kitchen refrigerator because you don't want the green one in the garage, right? If you just put refrigerator to be included in the sale, and they flip that baby out of there and put a green one in there, perfectly legal, nothing you can argue about. But if you say kitchen refrigerator to be included in the sale, then that's a refrigerator that you saw on the day you wrote the contract. Okay? So as you look at this list, garage door openers, keys, exterior, fences, sprinkler systems, notice in there, let me see, on the second one, exterior, if you've got underground or hardwired pet systems, the collars and controls have to stay. Now, this sometimes if you're listing the property and they've got Rottweilers with these things, and the next person buying's got a Chinese pug, then it won't do any good to leave the controller. So, you know, if they say we're taking the controllers with us, you could buy smaller controllers for pugs. Attic and ceiling fans, you wouldn't think somebody would take that, but they do sometimes. Lighting fixtures that are attached. Flush mounted speakers, this is getting to be more difficult because I consider that a flush mounted speaker over there, see it? But some people would argue that it's not because it's not flush with the wall. But they're supposed to stay. If you're kind of worried about whether they're going to take something like that, what should you do? Write it on line 18. Next section, systems and utilities, solar panels. That's become a real problem in the last few years because people are starting to put solar panels on their house, but they don't pay for them. They finance them. So if you're looking at a house with solar panels and it doesn't say anything in the agent remarks or the marketing remarks about whether they're paid for or not, you need to call the agent immediately and say, hey, look, I'm showing your house tomorrow and I see it's got solar panels on it. Have they been paid for? And if they say no, say how much they owe against it. You'll be shocked. You know, it could be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And say, okay, is the seller going to pay for it at closing? If they say no, then you have to ask, okay, can they assume the financing if your buyers want it? Now, could that affect their loan? Yes, it could. So, because I'm buying the house for 300,000, right? And my debt to income said I qualify for that, but now I've got to pay 40,000 for this system. So it's just like a car loan, right? So it's got to be figured into my debt to income ratio to see if I can buy it.
Would that be like an alarm system on a house too?
Alarm system's in there too. I just kind of skipped over that. Anymore, a lot of people have the wireless alarms.
Yeah.
If you want it, like we've got Simply Safe at my daughter's house. And if somebody bought her house, it's all wireless. So if they wanted it, they'd have to put it in there. It's not gonna be there when they get there. But you'll see all the time now, Ring doorbell is reserved, which means they've got to have a doorbell. If they take that off, there's got to be a doorbell somewhere there, but if they're taking that with them, or ring doorbell to go with the home. And then it's just a matter of reprogramming, right? Putting a new password in. Propane tanks is the next one that'll cause you a problem if you sell anywhere around the city. If you see a propane tank, or if you're looking at the MLS detail sheet, it should say propane in there somewhere, what the gas is. If you see that, your first question to the listing agent is, if it's not on there, who owns a propane tank? If it's owned by a company like Titan Propane out there towards Rogersville, that means that home seller can only buy gas from Titan unless he replaces that tank with somebody else, or he buys his own tank. If they own the tank, that's great. And every once in a while, you're going to see some hard-headed agent that says, my seller will sell you the tank, which I think is ridiculous. So you argue this way. It's a part of the heating system. Without that tank, we don't have heat. So I'm not going to pay for the furnace separately, so I'm not going to pay for the propane tank separately either. So just ignore that. Just say, no, propane tanks to be included. It's right there on paragraph or line 15. Hardwired security, you asked about alarms. If they're hardwired, they obviously stay. If they're wireless, you better ask. And if you want them, you better include them. Barbecue grills and fire pits. The barbecue grills, a lot of people are building the outdoor kitchens now, and they've got a green egg in there or something similar, a Primo maybe. But if they do, and you want it, line 18. Because if you show up the day of closing and the grill's gone, you're gonna have a fight on your hands. So you might have to make sure. And then on blind shade shutters on the last section there, typically the blinds and shutters stay on a house. Storm windows stay. Curtains and drapes don't stay unless you want them and you write them in. If they do take the curtains and drapes, then they've got to leave the hardware. They can't leave you just little holes up there. So the brackets all have to stay. The last one, attached floor covering, stay. That's funny, isn't it? Funny to me. All right, so we're going to include that, and anything else you want to include. So you want the gnomes out in the front yard, right? Your buyer's a gnome collector, and they've got lots of gnomes. Put that in there. If you don't want the gnomes, then it goes on the next line. It says no gnomes. The storage buildings in the back, you'll notice a lot of times these aren't anywhere on the disclosure. You might see a picture of it in the MLS detail, but if it's not on a concrete foundation, it can be moved. So if you want it, you write included. I would, just to be safe. If you don't want it, then you need to put in there excluded, seller to remove a storage building in the back. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen them. There's nice storage buildings, and then there are those tin ones that are leaning over with the rust on them. I don't want that in my backyard, so I want you to take that with you prior to closing. See what else? Playground equipment. You got kids? Yay, I want the playground equipment. You don't got kids? No, I don't want the playground equipment. Maybe it's rusty and old. You bought it at Kmart before they closed. I got some of that in my house. What else might you not want? Just think about it a minute. You've been looking at HGTV and listings now for years. So What is something that you might not want at the house that's there already? Above ground pools.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's varying degrees of this. I've seen some really nice ones with decks built around them, and they're as good as a $50,000, $75,000 pool. But if your client doesn't want an above ground pool and they've got an above ground pool, the seller to remove prior to closing. Okay? What else? Chicken coops. Dog runs. Anything else? Gnomes, damn it. Forgot the gnomes. Seller to remove all gnomes. I had this lady that I listed one time down in Branson, Rockaway Beach, I think. Anyhow, I'm listing the house going through and she goes, and nobody gets my gnomes. She had like 50 gnomes scattered around the front yard. So I'm putting that in there right now. But I had another lady that took all the fruit trees out of her yard, dug them all up. They were mature, not big, but they were mature enough that they were starting to produce. She dug every dang one of them up, just didn't even care.
And TV mounts have to stay, but TVs can go unless specified.
Yeah, I didn't mean to skip over that. I actually didn't. We had this problem, and if you came up here and looked behind this wall, you'd see what the problem is. People were taking the TVs and the mounts, and they'd either leave a big hole or they'd repair it and it'd look like heck, you know, they couldn't match the paint. They'd been there for 10 years or whatever. So the contract changed to say you can take the TVs, but the mounts stay. Or you can write in the contract, all TVs currently in the home to remain with the home at no value. That's really the best way to go if they're working, because you don't want to have to hang that thing up there, do you? You know, I mean, you prefer just it stays, and they're inexpensive enough that it's not as bad as expense. And sometimes the sellers really don't want to move them, you know, but you start throwing them in trucks and stuff like that and they get damaged. So that's not a bad idea to ask for those if they're in places that you like. Even if it's like this, 2-story house, you got a basement, there's a big TV down there. Seller TV in the basement, in the playroom or the TV room or whatever, to remain with the home at no value. Because, you know, maybe they're taking their ones upstairs that they've got. I had this seller down in Nixa last year, 2 years ago, maybe. Big house. 11 TVs. Yeah. She took 10 of them. She left the 11th one, the big one, but she took 10 of them with her. So it was an interesting conversation with the buyers because they're paying big money for this house. They thought to get the TVs too. And the other agent, I don't know if she hadn't gone to a contract class or not. And I said, I don't see that on line 18. And she said, I don't have to put that in there. So anyhow, we had a discussion about it. I'm glad you brought it up. All right, purchase price. Now, before you show a not before you show a property, but if you want to show properties to your buyer that they're qualified for, here's my deal. If they're qualified for 150,000, which is, you know, now really a rarity. I mean, good house at 150. Just because they're qualified here, that doesn't mean that's what I'm going to show them, you know, and I'm going to have that conversation with them. You know, are you comfortable making payments at that point? Has your lender told you what the payments would be? And do you have the amount of money that he told you? And typically I've had a conversation with the lender saying, we're going to have to bring on a $140,000 house, $4,360. Have you got that available to you to bring to the purchase? And then are these payments of $700, $800, whatever it is, are you comfortable with that? No, man, I'd really rather be at 600. Then let's find out from the lender what that would be. And then that's what I show them. Just because you're qualified to buy X doesn't mean you want to buy X, right? I mean, I can buy a lot of house. That doesn't mean I'm going to, because if I had to make a payment, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'd have to work again. You know, so keep that in mind. Just because your buyer says, hey, we've been qualified up to 400. The next question is, so where are you comfortable? You know, what are you comfortable at? And let's look at that first. If we can't find it, you know, we'll know there and then we'll go from there. So maybe you're comfortable at 350, which, you know, that's 50,000 at 7%, another 350 on the payment just in the base part of it. So, maybe they're more comfortable at, paying less than that. Nothing wrong with it. That's what you want to do. You're trying to protect your client's interests. Worst thing you ever do. Have you ever been house poor? When I first started teaching school, I was making $9,300 a year, swear to God, for the whole year. I told you that last night. Taught 6 classes, coached 7 sports, and drove the bus and made $9,300 a year. Rented a single wide trailer in Steelville, Missouri for $350 a month. I couldn't afford it because my check was like $900 or $800 or something like that before taxes and retirement and all that. I had to get a job at a restaurant on the weekends. I met my wife there, so it worked out pretty good. But the point is, can you afford it? Maybe not, so you got to know that. All right, purchase price here is $139,900. Nice, actually, little 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, kind of on the northwest side, but it's in a nice area, just right off College Street. The seller concessions. The buyer wanted concessions. It's an MHDC, which is an FHA type of loan, I think. And anyhow, those concessions are part of the requirement of that loan. So we had to ask for them. Those concessions go to pay costs associated with the loan. They don't go to anything else. They could go to the appraisal, they could go to the inspection, but the lender determines where those costs go. So really the net to the seller here already is $135,900, right? So that's what the seller has to think about. If you're doing a USDA loan, this could have been $5,000 or $6,000. If it's an FHA loan, it's typically 3% of the price, so it would be $4,200, right? 3.5%. So when you talk to the lender, you say, you should ask every time, does the buyer need or want concessions? Yeah, he's going to need concessions because he only has this much cash on hand. So how much does he need in concessions on 100, whatever you're looking at, that price? And the lender can tell you exactly what he will need, but you just need a number, right? To put in the contract to get the proposal going. Now, guess what? Over the last 2 years, nobody took a contract with concessions because they knew they could sell it and probably sell it for more money. Thank God we're past that. Because there are people in this world that actually like to live in a house and they need concessions to buy it. And we should be happy for them because that's how you get started, right? You buy a house, you build some equity, you go to the next level, or you live there for the rest of your life, but at least you're not paying off somebody else's house. And then he put down earnest money, which you're not required to do. You don't have to have earnest money to make the contract a good contract. You can put 0 down there and that's fine. Earnest money is exactly what it says. So if you went to school ever and you had any vocabulary lessons, earnest. I mean, I intend to do this. This is what I'm earnest about it. I'm serious. That's what earnest money is. That money has to be delivered to Hogan Land and Title in less than 5 days. You can see it on line 26. I wouldn't use that 5-day marker anymore. It used to be 10 and then the lawyers changed it. I like 10 days on that because number one, nobody uses a check anymore, right? Except for me, I probably got one. But they don't have their checkbook with them when they're writing the contract on the house. And so they've got to go home, get the check, and it's 7 o'clock at night on a Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, they go to work. You call them on Tuesday and say, hey, did you deposit the earnest money? You're already 5 days in. So I like 10 days in there. And if I were you, I'd just make a note 10 days to deposit the earnest money. Now, most of the title companies now are doing it electronically, so you can do it that way. And I've had clients do that and they really like it. So that makes it easier, but still, I think 10 days is reasonable. I think that's what you should try to do.
How does that work in command? Do you just have to have an account set up to where they can electronically do it?
No, I think what happens is it's like Hogan. Let's say you've got this contract with Hogan. You can just call Angel or email Angel and she'll send you the instructions, send the instructions to your client. This is something you want out of your hands a little bit because it's their earnest money, not yours. Yeah. In command, all you would put in command is the receipt, once you've got that receipt for their deposit. That would be a document that you just add into the transaction. And I think most of the big title companies are all going electronic now, so you can just, transfer it out of an account. Now, the problem with this is if you don't deliver the earnest money in a timely manner, if you look at that in real bold writing, seller may terminate this contract. You don't want that. I mean, to me, what that reads is anytime in the 5 days. So I'm on my people pretty hard. If they put down earnest money, I want that earnest money. If they're not giving me a check right there when I'm writing it, I'll take responsibility for delivering it. Then I want them to get it in there because I don't want the seller to be able to terminate the contract, right? Which it says they could. Typically, I think the attorneys wrote this wrong because they should have said if it's not delivered within the 5 days, then the seller may terminate, but they don't say that. They just say the seller may, if it's not timely, then they can terminate. Talks about additional earnest money there, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about it. That's typically on new construction. You're making changes or something like that. Sometimes the builder will say, I want additional earnest money put down. If you get to that and you don't understand it, come see me or talk to any agent who's involved in new construction. They'll explain it to you. All right, closing. We're finally there. So if we write a contract today, when do we close on it?
Usually 30 days.
30? 45?
Isn't it up to the bank?
Yeah, it's up to the lender.
Yeah.
Most of the time, but the lenders have gotten so much better than they used to because they have teams and admins and people that are quality and skilled that you can sometimes, in most cases, close one in 30. If you're dealing with a government loan, you better ask the lender. We're going to write a contract. I know it's an FHA loan. What's the time that we need for closing? And they'll tell you. But then the next question to ask is of the buyer, right? And wouldn't that be the person to ask? When do you want to close? They'll say the same thing, as soon as possible, which is a lie because they got to get their ducks in order to close and financing and all that. But you do want to know because if they say, I'd love to close in 30 days, but we're going on vacation, the first 2 weeks or whatever, or I'm currently in a lease and it doesn't end until May 30th. You think they'd accept that? Normally they wouldn't, but right now it's the 22nd. It'd be 67 days basically. They might now in this current market, not last year, but in the current market. So you have to ask the buyer and the buyer says, well, I'd like to close during this time frame. Hopefully you've already had a conversation with the lender. If not, you shoot them a text on your phone. If you've got him in your phone now as a contact, which you should have, and say, how long for an FHA closing? Can we close on this date? And then when you do that, since all you guys are younger, you look at your calendar to make sure it's not a Saturday or Sunday. It's always an on or before date anyway. That's what they accept in the legal side of it. But it makes you look silly if you put April 28th down and it's a Sunday. Because your clients will question that at some point. Even if they don't know right now, they'll question at some point. So try to do you do it whatever you want to. Most people close when? What day?
Fridays.
Friday's it. And when do they close most of the time? Which part of the month? End of the month. Why? I don't get that. But
Because you can skip that. Makes to where you don't have a payment due for 60
yeah, but
days.
if you close on the 15th, you don't have one for 45 days either. It's the same thing, sometimes longer than that. I mean, you're still getting charged interest, but you don't have the payment. Anyhow, go to the title company on the end of the month, even in a slow market, it's busy. You go there like today, you probably just walk in, close, they'd be real happy to see you. Versus Friday. This Friday, it'll be busy, and then next Friday, it'll be a lot busier. Is that Good Friday next Friday? No, 2 Fridays in it. Okay, so they're going to close at Hogan Land Title, and you have to identify that. We've already identified that in line 25. Now we're going to identify it again. And we added Angel Inman in there because we like closing with her. This is our contract. We like closing with Angel Inman at Hogan. She just does a good job.
And she doesn't yak a lot. You know, there's no unnecessary talk about her kids or horses or dogs. I don't give a damn about all that stuff. Do you? No, close it. My clients want to buy a house, you know, let's just do that. Some of them do that. You may like that. If you like that, then go find that person. Where do you close at? Your clients are, you're gonna say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, where would you like to close this at? And they're gonna say, I don't know. They really are. Yeah, even if they're around town, unless they are active in the real estate market or have some connections to a title company, they're gonna say, I don't know. So you literally, most of the time, get to choose that. I'd give them a couple options if it was me. And you can choose that as you go along. If you're working as a buyer the first few times, you know, you've got to determine it right now when you're writing an offer where you're closing, because that makes it a legitimate, valid contract. So you have to put it in there. So, and you have to know the street it's on, even if you don't know the physical address. Okay, so it says here, Hogan Land Title, Angel Inman, closing agent. When it says agent, you don't have to have the name, that's referencing the company. At Sunshine, that's their location. If they have multiple locations, you have to have at least the street on April 28th, 2023. And this date was given to us by the buyer and the lender when Lene, the girl I worked with, wrote the contract.
So if we're new, we don't know title companies, we should get to know some title companies.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And you can do it through board activities, or you can talk to agents, you know, maybe that you know in the company and say, you know, who do you use? But the next question after who do you use would be, okay, why do you use those guys? There's the one thing you want from a title company. You want communication on a regular basis. Most of them are good at it now. I mean, they hit you with an email as soon as the title commitment comes. They say, you know, they send an invitation to you and your client setting up the closing in a Google Calendar, you know, things like that. But you want communication from them. And then I want respect too. You know, you're gonna be looking at the MLS and you'll see seller prefers to close at blah, blah, blah. It's probably the damn agent that wants to close there. They probably got some connection. Maybe they go drinking together, or maybe they're in church together, or whatever it might be. But I don't like that, you know. I don't like somebody else dictating to me where I'm gonna close this transaction. And they may be receiving some type of benefit from closing there on a regular basis. Now, if it's a builder, I get it, because their funds are escrowed there for all their new construction, all that. I get that totally. I'm happy to close there. But for somebody to say, no, we want to close here because that's where my best friend works or whatever, I don't care. My client wants to close at Hogan Land and Title. And so, yes, that's how you find out. You just ask around, but where do you close? You know, why? Why do you choose those people? All right, so we got all that taken care of, and then look, here's the funny thing about it. Possession of keys delivered at closing, buyer's not responsible for the keys, da. Back to 34, sorry, and then we'll move down on paragraph 4. Subject to the terms of the contract, so they've all been met, the sale will be closed. And here's what closing means: the unconditional release and exchange of the deed for the purchase price, together with all other documents and funds required by this contract. That's what a closing is. So it used to be that we might not get recorded for 2 or 3 days. So sometimes when we gave possession of a house to somebody, you know, the title company might record in batches, you know, because they had to take them literally to the courthouse to record them. We weren't really legally having closings. Now, though, electronically, they just push a button and they've got it recorded. So that's all taken care of. But also the last part in there I wanted you to know is, and all funds, because you're going to go to a closing sometime and the funds aren't going to be there. They're going to say, you know, we'll cut checks either to the seller or the buyer or the commissions or whatever once we're funded. And, you know, that's if you're working with the seller, you're like, oh, here we go. But typically we think of wire transmissions just going like this. They don't. They go to federal banks and go through that process. So sometimes it does take a while. So just at some point in your career, you're gonna have to sit there waiting for funding. Longest I've ever waited is 11 hours. But that was only once. So you don't have to worry about it that often. I just thought I'd point it out just in case you get there. And then you'll sit there and say, I remember Jim saying that. Now, you attach a rider of possession is going to be delivered anytime other than closing. Really, it's not a good idea. Possession prior to closing, kind of a bad idea. Possession after closing for the seller, kind of a bad idea. Because you paid for the house. And that's what I tell people when they ask me if they can have possession after closing if I'm buying it. No. If I give you $100,000 for a house, I want my house, right? Possession prior to closing, no. I don't like that because they can go in there and tear stuff up. And they can make it worse and then they blame it on you. And that's a bad deal too. And then the other thing, what if they don't close? What if their funding falls through? And then they're in your house. You have to evict them, right? Physically evict them. You've got to go get an eviction notice, depending on what documentation you have. But I do like MSC 2085R, that's on line 43, limited purpose entry by buyer prior to closing. We're asking people to move from 2,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet, all their furniture, all their personal items, all their clothes, everything in one day. We do it all the time. We don't think anything about it because that's what we do for real estate. Damn, it's hard, isn't it? So a lot of times if the house is vacant and my clients even mention it briefly, I'll say, let me ask for limited purpose entry and we'll use one of the garage bays to put all your personal items. And so I'll write that in there. I'll write a limited purpose entry, you know, for the purpose of placing boxes and small items in the second bay or the third bay of the garage. Buyers will not enter the home. Now, you can't move your furniture and your refrigerator and your dogs and all that stuff in there, but you can put all this personal property in there. And then your insurance coverage, trust me, already covers that. If you've got insurance on your current property, it covers it. Now, if you have renter's insurance, you probably ought to take out a policy to cover that, but it's fine. And that way, when it comes the day to move, the big truck shows up with the three guys, they're moving the big stuff, right? You got the most of the little stuff out of there. You got all the kids' 14 dolls and all that stuff, all moved. So I like that one, and I've used it a lot. And if you sell a farm, you can't move cows in one day, not more than 5 or 6. Well, I guess you could 5 or 6, but let's say you got 30. You're not moving 30 in one day. And you can't move all the trailers on a farm. There's always multiple trailers. And if you got tractors, you can't move all those in one day if you're moving any distance at all. So you've got to have limited purpose entry on a farm sale. Typically, if they ask, even if they even think about it, you should bring it up and ask the next person, the seller, would you mind giving us a space out here where we could put this equipment while we move? And then you could start moving it over the course of a week or two. And cattle especially. And I've had them move cows into, you know, obviously fenced areas the week before they move. Takes them 3 or 4 days to get it done.
You can't do a verbal agreement on that. You have to do it. Well, we did that to my house.
Yeah, it's probably, I mean, you can't enforce a verbal agreement is a problem. I know they tell you in real estate school that you can, and you know, it's enforceable. It's really not.
Okay.
It's a he said, she said, and that's a hard one to enforce. So if it was me, I'd get something in writing. And I like this document because it's a legal document and signed by both parties. And then 45 through 48, basically the seller's going to warrant that the property will be vacant at the time of closing, unless they have tenants. If you got tenants, whole different ball of wax. You're going to have to deal with that as a separate document. But notice what it says. And in its present condition, this is line 46, together with any improvements or repairs required by this contract, ordinary wear and tear accepted, and free of any debris or personal property not included above. Doesn't say anything about clean, does it? So you're going to run into that. But if you do run into it, we had two agents last week, 2 different transactions where they called and said, they left all kinds of stuff in here. What do I do? You shoot a picture of it on your phone. This is during their walkthrough on the house before closing. and you send it to the other agent and say, we've got a problem, there's personal property in the house. What's the seller going to do to take care of this? Are you going to take care of it? And it could just be bags of clothes or whatever it might be, but it could be a lot of stuff, and that's an extra expense for the seller or the buyer, and they don't want it. So shoot a picture, send it to them. Same thing with repairs. You do your walkthrough, they're supposed to fix that wall over there, they didn't fix that wall. Shoot a picture of it, text the agent, call the agent. We've got a problem. I just sent you a picture. How are we gonna handle that? Are they want to go ahead and repair it, or will they just compensate us? And we think that repair is going to probably take at least $300. And if that's the case, that's fine. We'll just add that to the closing and we can go on forward. But you've got to address it immediately. And then if you do address it and they agree to it, somewhere in writing, on the seller appraisal and financing contingencies, we finally made it to page 2. This contract is not contingent upon the sale and or closing of any other existing property. In other words, the buyer doesn't have a house to sell. You're going to mark one of these 2 boxes every time. The second one, this contract is contingent upon the sale and or closing of existing property. If this box is checked, then complete and attach, either rider, contingency for the sale of buyer's property or contingency for closing. Contingency for closing is a good thing. I've got my house on the market, it's under contract, I've done inspections, I find another house I want to buy, contingency for closing. If I'm a listing agent and I get an offer of contingency for the close, my first question to the other agent is, how far along are you in the process? Well, we've already had inspections. We're taking it, depending on price, terms. That's just like a loan, right? Basically, if you get through inspections, that's the hardest part of the contract. Now, if you get one that says this is contingent on the sale of buyer's existing property, the first question is it on the market? How long has it been on the market? Is it getting actively shown? And again, the last 2 years wouldn't matter because whatever you put on the market, it's sold. But now that's not the case. I've got a house in Willard right now on 405 Chandler that any of you can sell. It's 3,300 square feet, 335,000, walkout basement, newer roof, you can sell it. And the seller's got a contingency on one in Willard that's on one level because she's a single woman older and she wants to get on one level. Sell the dang thing. I don't think it's priced because it's in pretty good condition. It's on 3,300 square feet. You'd think 335 is the right price, right? That's under everything else we're seeing is $140 to $200 a square foot. That's $101 or $2 a square foot. Maybe you should look it up. You probably know somebody that wants to live in Willard.
We're about to build a bunch of houses in Willard.
This is the commercial. Now, but the point is, the seller on the other house took the contingency just like that. We had it on the market. Last 2 years, he wouldn't even looked at it. And he hadn't bugged me about it every day, which I would be. I think his house is overpriced, but she really likes it, so not my deal. It's still got to appraise. But we're sitting out here now, we're 29 days on the market, which is a long time, compared to what it's been. And we got one showing this week. So, but anyhow, if you check that box on 52, you got to include a rider. If you don't include the rider, then the contract's not valid. And we see this occasionally from agents out east in the eastern counties that don't work for companies that have training. They don't include this, and then it's not a valid contract. And so the client looks at it and goes, well, what house are they selling? Where is it at? Is it listed or whatever? So
this will be checked a lot. You're doing this rider a lot because most people are waiting for their house to close in order to buy the next house. So this will be something a rider we'd be using.
I would think it's pretty common. Okay. Now, again, here's the problem.
the last 2 years, people wouldn't even accept contingency for closing. I mean, they didn't care, because you listed a house for 200 and then you might sell it for 230, or 300, might sell it for 340. And you might have 10 offers on it. It was stupid. You just can't believe how stupid it was. I'm glad we're past that, except that I'd like to have Chandler sell for this lady so she can go on, you know. We thought we might sell it the first weekend, have it. But yeah, but a lot of people do have to close on their house. But here's the problem in the last 2 years, which made the market hard as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people would just waive that contingency and just say, you know what, we've got faith. Yeah. I wouldn't do it. I think if, it's not that maybe financially you can afford it, but do you want two houses at the same time? Yeah. You can't do that though. If somebody gets into that, remember there's a thing called a bridge loan, which basically you're taking equity out of your house. And if you've got a lot of equity, to buy the next house. You're not going to have a payment on the one you're taking equity out of for at least 30 days. You're not going to have payment on the other one for at least 45 days. So you've got a gap in there and a bridge for that reason. You're bridging this time period when you think yours is going to sell, and you know. So don't be afraid of that. If they are good, financially sound people, they'll understand it and they can work it out. All right, on appraisal contingencies, I always check the box, and then on line 63, you'll see a blank down there that says how many days to get this done. Lenders are notorious for getting the appraisals done in the last week. So we got a 40 or so day closing. I'm putting 40 days in the blank. Because what it says is, my lender is going to order an appraisal and he's going to go out and appraise it. And if it doesn't appraise to contract price, then we can negotiate this. I can ask for the seller in an appraisal notice on line 64 to reduce the price if it doesn't appraise to the appraised value, or I can agree to pay the difference, or we can negotiate something in between, right? Or I can terminate the contract without penalty.
So you leave that next one blank.
Yes,
Okay.
because I don't care. I mean, if I send them an appraisal notice saying, look, we wrote the contract for 139.9 and it appraised at 134. You know, we want you to reduce the price to 134, pay the $4,000 in concessions, and we'll go to closing. I don't want them to have 10 days to think about it. I want them to make a decision immediately so we can move forward with the contract. But here's the problem. If you put 25 in there and you get the appraisal back on the 26th day and it's undervalued, you can't do anything. You can if it's a government loan. You know, they don't have to buy it then, but you've got more leverage with this paragraph by sending over an appraisal notice. So you want to extend it at least close to closing. And then you'll see in there an appraisal resolution deadline. That's what they're talking about. Here's how long the seller has to respond, and we've got to reach a written agreement as to what happens, or the contract automatically terminates. And then on 71, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, what kind of loan are we getting? Look, box 1 is what I use. If I'm buying something, I say, you know, it's not a condition of financing, but I might still finance a portion of it. So say I'm buying a house that I want to remodel and then sell in the future. Let's say it's 100,000, just to give a round number. Maybe I don't want to take 100,000 out and put it on that house. Maybe I'll want to take 50 and then I'll keep 50 of my cash to pay for the remodel, right? And I'll finance the other. You're only going to be there 90 days, maybe, hopefully. And so I'll pay that interest on that 90 days, but I need that cash so I can pay contractors and vendors and things like that, and material costs, things like that. That's not uncommon. It's really a cash purchase for all intents and purposes. But they may ask for a pre-approval letter or a proof of funds. This was really common in the last 2 years, where people just say, look, we got the money to buy it. Here's my 401k or my investment document or whatever. 2, non-conventional. This is a government loan.
And that used to be 40% of the market, and guess what? The last 2 years, it's been about 12% of the market. It just dropped out because nobody wanted to take a government loan. Why? Government loans are bad. They're not bad, they're just loans. You know, they're putting down 3.5%. You know, when I was young, if you could say for $150,000 house, 3.5% would be what, 5,000? I mean, how many people do you know that are young, just starting out, can save 5,000 and have it to spend, you know? So if somebody wants to buy one, they want 3.5% concessions because they've saved 3.5, you ought to be hallelujah, you know? You've done a heck of a job. I'm really proud of you. But if you check the box, you've got to have one of those, the government loan rider attached. And then on 3, on conventional, this is typically at least 5% down. But you'll see on this one, I told you it was an unusual loan, and you need to check into this too. It's pretty cool, actually. This is through Central Bank, I think, but USA Mortgage is doing it too. There are areas of the city blocked off where they'll give you a conventional loan, but it's MHDC backed, and the interest rate is basically 50% of the current rate. So this guy's getting this house at 4%. That's a good rate. So you need to ask about that. It's a directed loan. And what they do, if you talk to Casey Cooper, he's a guy that sometimes comes in here from USA Mortgage. He'll send you this deal and it's got a map and you can see all the areas. Some of them aren't bad, you know, where you can get this loan. But if you were in Rolla, for example, Catherine, I'd check with my lenders up there, see if they've got something like that up there. Think about that. She's on Zoom. In line 80, I would put 40 days again, just like I did up there on the appraisal deal. And the reason being is that that's a loan contingency deadline. So what that says, and here's how lenders again are notorious, the last week of the contract, they'll call you and go, "Ah, man, I hate to tell you this, we got a problem." And you say, "Well, what's the problem?" "Well, it turns out he can't qualify, debt to income's too high," whatever it might be. And you go, "I can't terminate the contract because down on line 95, if you look at that, it says if the loan contingency deadline passes without a termination, buyer remains obligated under this contract to purchase the property." I mean, that's bad, right? Now, most buyers don't have that money anyway available to them, or they got the loan, right? But it opens them up for litigation.
If
So-
you're closing in 30 days, would you put 30 instead of 40?
Yeah, yeah.
So just whatever your closing date.
Yep. And there's AMAX, that broke over there, he's a different duck. He says, "When you send me a contract like that, I'm not even gonna look at it." You know, I'm just trying to protect my client. He just feels like there's not really an intent to purchase. You gotta protect your client. If you can't get the loan, he can't get the loan. You don't want him, just because you didn't fill in a blank, to suddenly be under default, which is basically what it would call it. 87, 88, 89, if you know this. So for example, they're getting a 97% loan. So 3% down is what he's putting down on this 139.9 house. If you fill out the first blank, you don't have to fill out the second one. Initial interest rate not to exceed 5. Well, the typical rates on the market right now are over 5, aren't they? But he's getting this special rate that's 4. But it could change, but it doesn't affect his ability to buy unless it goes to 5. That is a protection for your client. So if your client's qualified right now at 6.5%, they've gone out and the lender says, they can borrow $200,000 at 6.5%, then you really need to ask the lender, what happens if it goes to 7? Well, they'll be fine there. How about 7.5? Nope, can't buy it. So you've got to put a top in there to protect your client, because then if the interest rate goes up like it did rapidly from August to February, whatever it was, you've got to protect your client. So put a cap in there somewhere.
don't put it so close, you know, if the interest rate currently is 5, don't put it at 5.
Could you put TBD?
No,
No.
I hate TBD.
Okay.
We have the girl that works with me puts TBD and stuff.
That's what she told me.
I know, and so I see it all the time, because after review contracts, occasionally they put TBD, and I said, what is that? That means nothing.
Okay.
I mean, it really doesn't. What does it mean? Does that mean at 2%, they can terminate the contract if it goes above 2? Or is it 10? So when is it determined? That's the other thing that an attorney would ask you. So exactly when you wrote that offer, when did you think it would be determined that she would know?
Right. Yeah.
Be like, I don't know. No, don't put TBD in there. There's just no reason to do it, because you should be having a conversation with the lender, right? You should be having a conversation with them.
Those are what your questions you ask.
Yeah, if they say, well, I haven't made a decision on a lender, still one of the lenders, if they're talking to somebody, and hopefully they're already talking to somebody, would have told them, you know, here's the basics, not specifics, but basics. And so you've got to put something in there. And then amortization term, it's probably going to be 30 years, and it's probably going to be a fixed loan on 89, even though if the market continues to get squishy like it is, we might see more adjustable mortgages. I like adjustable mortgages. If the interest rate's 7% and I can get a 5-year 5-1 ARM, they call it, at 5%, I'm taking the 5-1 ARM, because I don't want to be doing it in 5 years. What were you doing 5 years ago? You weren't in real estate, were you?
No.
Yeah, I mean, you know, where were you? Teaching school, right? Or somewhere? So, you know, I mean, the difference is 5 years is a long time. All I've got to do is pay attention. And if it can't go up more than 5% in that first 5 years, that's the 5-year ARM that I'm going to get, not the ones where it goes up 1% each year. Then I might just stay in it to the 4th year and take my chances, and then just refinance at that point. So don't be afraid of adjustable mortgages. Or somebody comes into town, they're going to go to work at Jack Henry, O'Reilly, Missouri State University. If they're a coach, they'll be gone in 3 years anyway. Mueller, somebody, and they say, look, I'm just going to be here 2 years. Well, it makes sense. Get an adjustable, get the best adjustable rate you can get and take that. And then other terms on line 90, this is it. It's an MHDC 100% loan program. Okay, I already talked about the contingency. If you let that deadline pass, you're opening up your seller for failure. All right, on number 6, title and survey. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to write the offer, and if you're a good agent, buyer, or a listing agent, either one, as soon as it's under contract, pop that baby, scan it in, get it into wherever you're using, DocuSign or .loop or whatever you might be using, and get it to the title company, whoever the title person is, and say, you know, here it is. Now, the listing agent's supposed to do that. I don't trust them a bit, so I send it over immediately myself. I don't care if they get duplicate copies or not. I want to make sure it's there because I want the title work to start immediately. Here's what happens on the title work. As soon as the title company gets it, they place a title order in their company and they start doing the research. I want to know, are there any liens against the property other than the mortgage? I want to know, are there any easement issues against the property? I want to know, does this guy owe federal taxes more than the value of his house? I want to know, does that person that's selling the house have child support payments that they haven't paid? Because the title company looks for all that. So I want that done immediately. And it says that within 10 days, they'll get you that title work. And when they get it, you should look at it. Now, you're not an attorney, so you don't have to read it in detail. A good title company will say, hey, we got a problem. That's why you want to work with a good title company. They'll say, he's got a federal tax lien. Or, you know, this guy owes child support. I sold some land out in Walnut Grove a few years ago. It was just a small piece of land. And the guy owed more child support than the sales price on the property. I mean, it's not funny, but his wife got it, thank God.
So
I
most
mean,
of
she
the
got
time
the
you-
child support, this she just had been assigned to her by a judge. I thought it was pretty cool. I never heard of that. All right, so you get why we're doing title work? So we do title work, we find a problem. I'm going kind of through the paragraph as a whole here. Here's what happens. We got a problem. We immediately notify the other agent. They should have already seen it because they're getting the same thing you are. And you tell them, say, look, it looks like we've got a problem. There's a federal tax lien against the property. It's, $75,000. How's your seller gonna handle that? Right? Or, hey, unfortunately, the title work shows there's an easement that runs through the garage. Is that correct? We need to get that corrected prior to closing. Okay? So, once you know about the defect or whatever it is in the title, you put in writing, you give them a notice that says, I want this corrected before closing. And then the seller has to respond and say, I'll fix it or I won't fix it. So if you're buying a property like a farm or some land or something like that, it allows on line 107 to get a survey. And if you get the survey and these things turn up, and this what typically turns up in a survey on rural land are boundary issues. You thought you were buying 25 acres and you're getting 22. Or the west side line is 15 feet in from where it's currently located. Things like that. So you go back to the seller in writing and say, per the survey, as you can see, I want you to correct this before closing. And the seller has to respond in writing that they'll either fix it or they're not going to fix it. Or maybe they give you a monetary something in money to fix it in your mind and you accept it. The problem is a lot of times the title company says, if you don't get this fixed, then there's a cloud on the title is what they call it. You don't want a cloud on the title. So that's why the title company, you get it to them immediately, let them do their work. If he gets a survey, the buyer gets a survey on this 25 acres, comes back, there's these issues, there's a boundary dispute, the well's not on the property, the west line's 15 to 25 feet off, then the buyer could ask the seller to fix it. And if the seller says, I ain't fixing nothing, man, it's been like that for 50 years, then the buyer doesn't have to pay for the survey. He may have already paid for it, but now it's the seller's responsibility because the defect caused it not to close and the defect was identified by the survey. That's what the contract says. Okay, back up to 103 or 101 through 105. The title company is going to charge money for the closing. You think that's how they make money. They really don't. They make money off title insurance. Because they do a lot of work just to get you to a closing, then only charge you $400 or whatever it is. The fairest option there is C. Seller shall deliver to buyer a title commitment. In other words, at seller's cost, the seller is going to pay for the title company to do the research and provide a title commitment. And then the buyer, especially if he's getting a loan, will pay for his owner policy. If you're paying cash, you don't have to get any title insurance. But if you get a loan, the lender is going to require title insurance, and that's a higher cost than the closing. That's why none of these others are good ideas, because number A and B both charge the seller more and D charges the buyer more. The best option, the fairest option in a transaction is C. That's fair and balanced for both parties. The seller does the search. The buyer is the one who gets the benefit of his insurance, so he pays for it. The seller shouldn't be paying for that, in my opinion. So C is the best option. If you get a contract that has something else, you need to really look at it and say, okay, why did you check that? And that's just a call to the agent. And sometimes they're just not very smart. Okay, then this next page, we're on page 3 finally, is look at line 122, and this is if we have objections for the title or the survey. Note if seller fails to timely respond to buyer's objections, then seller shall be deemed to have refused, agree to correct any of them. Okay, and that which means you can terminate the contract at that point if you want to. Okay?
So you leave those blank.
Huh?
You leave 118 blank.
Yeah.
Yes, again, I don't want him to have any more than 7 days to respond to.
So those are the ones.
Right. You want them to respond quickly, right? You're in the middle of a transaction and maybe it is a farm or raw land or whatever, and it's a 60-day transaction. Say that by day 40, you find out there's a problem. You don't want to go to day 59 and then the seller go, I'm not fixing anything. Your buyer goes, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and buy it like it is. You don't want that. You want to give the seller the opportunity to correct whatever the objections might be. Right, paragraph 7 is all about inspections. I love this because look, the first line, the property is being sold in its present condition with no warranties expressed or implied, except as may be given to the buyer in writing. It's as is, really, isn't it? And then it goes on to say conditions of the property that are disclosed or clearly visible should be considered by buyer in setting the purchase price, or by making correction of such conditions by seller or requirement of the contractor. That's what we did for years, and then we got into this stupid market, and you couldn't do anything. You go into a house and it'd be in just average condition, and the roof might look bad and all that. You still had to offer full price or more. It was ridiculous. We're normally going to a house and, you know, I go into a house, first thing I'm gonna do, just like I told you earlier, is do a CMA. That house is overpriced. I go look at it, you know, I write the offer. My client says, what do you think we should offer? I said, well, you know, I showed you the CMA. I think it's overpriced. It's overpriced by at least $10,000. And they say, what do you think we should offer that? I said, that's entirely up to you, but I'm just saying, I believe it is. Now, maybe the locations makes up for some of that. But, or maybe the fact that it's got a kitchen downstairs makes up for some of that for you. But point is, the CMA doesn't support the price they're offering you that. None of them would have supported the last 2 years. There wasn't a CMA out there that says you should pay 50 to 100,000 more for a house, as is cash. No appraisal. Close tomorrow. So your client says, okay, I want to offer 235. Okay. It's a $240,000 house, 245. So it's 10,000 overpriced. And I think my CMA shows that he offers, what did I say, 240. Okay, he offers 240, so 5,000 less. And I say, you know, I just want you to know, because you're professionals and the contract tells you to do this. I noticed there was a hole in the ceiling in the living room. I think we should ask for the buyer to fix, or the seller to fix that, don't you? Yeah. If not, then we can reduce the price more. I noticed the glass was broken in the front door. I'm writing it in the offer. I noticed that the railing is falling off the back porch, or there's broken boards in there. I'm writing it in the offer. I just put it right in special agreements. Seller to fix this, seller to fix that, seller to do this, seller to do that. That's the way it should be done. It hadn't been done that way. We lost track of that the last 2 years, but we got $4,000 in concessions on this contract, and that probably hadn't been, well, we haven't been able to do it for 2 years. So you just have to remember. So it says it right in the paragraph. When you write your offer, you know, remember it's as is, unless the seller says, I'm going to fix this, I put a new roof on or whatever it might be, or you should take that into account when you're making your offer. It's really important now for your clients. Now, don't be a dumb butt and just say, you know, let's see if we can steal it. I mean, if your buyer wants to buy and they're qualified, there aren't that many houses out there, right? There's only one on Chandler for sale, by the way, in Willard. If he wants to buy it, you don't want to kick him out because of price. And they may tell you that. The buyer say, look, you know, we've been looking for quite a while now. We want to just go ahead and buy this. Full price offer if you want, write it up. But let them tell you that. Don't you say, I know our agents are doing this. I really think you ought to pay full price. You know, it's not your job. I mean, give them data to support what you're saying. Last 2 years, listen, every house we've written on in the last 3 months, there's been 10 or more offers on, and all of them sold over list price, some without appraisal, some without inspection, some of them cash. You know, so what do you want to do here? How much do you think we should go over? That's what they asked me, and I'm like, you're asking me, I wouldn't. I mean, my honest opinion, I'm never paying over that. I'm never paying over list price. That's me, but I'm just old, you know. if you need the house, I guess you could pay over it. All right, so it goes on to say that if you're going to write an as-is contract, then you should use an as-is rider. Did I give you that? Okay, that's the best document in the world because it's very specific. There's three options. One, as is, and I won't lie, I make a mistake. The first one, as is, and buyer may physically inspect the property or have it inspected, but the seller will make no repairs and the buyer retains the right to terminate. Wait a minute. That sounds like the contract itself, doesn't it? I don't like that one on an as is. But number two, I really like. You can physically inspect the property, but I'm not gonna make any repairs and you can't terminate. That's as is, right? I don't care if they inspect it to death. But I like the fact that they can't terminate the contract after they inspect it. That's an as-is sell to me. Three, though, goes even deeper. You don't get to inspect it, you can't terminate. Who uses that? Investors, right? Right? I mean, they want a house really bad, it's in a neighborhood, it's got a great price on it or a good price, and they know they can make money on it, either turn it to a rental or remodel it and sell it again. That's the number three. Remember, if you include this in your contract, then you got to stand behind it, your buyer does. Okay? They can't go in and do an inspection on number two and say, whoa, termites, mold, I'm out of here. You know, you can't do that. That's not what the contract allows. Now, could your buyer terminate, or not terminate, but default on the contract? Yeah. But he's agreeing this for, so if your buyer says, I'm gonna buy it as is, give them all three options. Or number one, that's really not, that's kind of like the contract. You know, I can do an inspection, then I can terminate if I want to after the inspection. That's the same language that's in the contract. But I love that thing because the agents, what they were doing, and that's the reason for this rider, is they were writing in there. It's an as-is purchase. Well, paragraph 7 doesn't allow an as-is purchase. And so they get halfway through the contract, say we're going to terminate, you know, or whatever, and say, no, you got to adhere to paragraph 7. Seven A also says the buyer can inspect and the buyer can appraise. Or a buyer's representative. Now, that means that if you're representing the buyer and the buyer thinks he's a contractor and he wants to inspect it himself, he can. Or the dad can inspect it, or the grandpa or grandma or whatever. Bad idea. What you really want is somebody that does it every day to do it and follows some kind of guidelines and gives you a real live report. But they can. That's what the contract says. They're going to limit the buyer from doing that. On 145 on property data, this is what's called the buyer remorse paragraph since it was in its inception. It says within either insert NA or 5 days, if none stated, after the effective date, the buyer may review additional data. If they got a problem with it, they can terminate the contract. And it says some things they can look at, like school district, taxes, square footage, convicted criminals, sex offenders, all that. That was a real problem in the last 2 years because nobody had any time to do anything. House come on the market, everybody runs over and looks at it. You know, if you're representing clients with small children, you should be concerned about some of these things, right? Or children, or it doesn't matter. Any human being, you should be concerned about some of these. But really, your buyer is the one that's responsible for doing the research, not you, you know? And you should kind of tell them that, really the buyer, you say, you know what? If you're concerned about whether it's sex offenders in the subdivision or whatever, you know, go to the Highway Patrol, the Greene County Sheriff's site, and just type in, you know, Missouri State Highway Patrol, sex offenders, Greene County or whatever, or a specific subdivision, or Greene County, it'll come up. You don't want to look at criminal activity on a map, I'll tell you why. because the map's this big, and so it looks like it's on fire. And then if you expand it out, it's not quite as bad, but when it's like that, I mean, they got this stuff all over, and you'd think everything just horrible, you know, the world's burning down. It's not. This is not Chicago or St. Louis. It's not perfect, certainly, but it's not that. But anyhow, that's the reason for that. And a lot of people won't accept a contract. They certainly wouldn't have in the last 2 years with any days in there at all. So when we made offers for the last 2 years, you almost always had to put 0 in there. But what it allows your buyer to do at any point within 5 days, okay? Unless you put NA or 0 or some other number in there, that buyer can terminate for any reason. I'm talking any reason. Wakes up with a headache, decides that somebody wasn't nice to them at JQH when they were there for a concert. Well, it doesn't matter. They're gone. They could be gone. And all they've got to do, you can send them a notice using a notice form, or you can just send the other agent an email. And all it has to say is, per the paragraph 7B, the property data paragraph, my client has decided to terminate the contract. That's it. You don't have to give a reason. You don't have to do anything. That's why most listing agents don't like it. Okay? Yeah.
So with new construction, or to contract, let's take an Anthony Park, and they wanted the non-refundable deposit.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like a day or two later, there was family emergency with my buyer, and it did a mutual release and had to pay some money. But I mean, is that what everybody's going to, the non-refundable deposits on new construction, or?
No, new construction though, it's typically related to whichever builder you're working with.
Okay.
And we've got one currently that's having some problems with that, non-refundable. They got $10,000 non-refundable. And here's the deal, it was deposited with the builder, not in a title company. So the builder's just like, it's said in the contract, non-refundable. They don't care if you got an emergency or not. I mean, why? It's non-refundable. I've taken this house off the market for you. I'm keeping this money. Even if it's a short time frame. Now, that's some builders. Now, other builders would be like, I get it. Here's the money back. But non-refundable to me is pretty clear, right?
I just didn't know if they're all going that way, or if I need to kind of watch out for certain builders.
No, I think it's just certain builders.
Okay.
Now, you're probably going to ask for it more now that the market's tougher. But if you're going to make changes and they come back and say, okay, we'll make these changes, but your earnest money is going to be non-refundable now. Okay, I come in and the fireplace is here in this house, you know, they've got framing done, or they've already got a plan here. Here's a plan. Because if they change that plan and I want to move the fireplace over to here, then they're going to have to go back through an approval process for that in most counties to get it moved. So if you want that fireplace moved, I'll move it for you. We're in the framing stage. It's not a big deal, but I'm gonna have to change your plans, because when they come in to inspect, they're gonna expect to see a fireplace frame there and it's over here. I gotta get it changed. But I want the non-refundable earnest money. The earnest money, the $5,000 you put down, is now non-refundable. And same thing. I don't want granite. I want marble, or what is it? What's the other? No, I don't want, what's the cheaper one? Quartz. Quartz. I don't want quartz. I want granite, because granite's more expensive. Okay. If you want granite, but I've told you I was going to put quartz in here and you could choose it at this place. You can still choose it at that place, but the earnest money now goes non-refundable. Or I want a 48-inch chef range. I don't want that little 36-inch oven with 6 burners. I want the big one. Well, I'm gonna have to change a cabinet package. If I do that, the earnest money is now non-refundable. And I think, by God, non-refundable means non-refundable. You don't get it back. If you want out of the contract, it's my money.
In our case, they were wanting $9,000 and more hardwood flooring in the bedrooms, but they hadn't ordered it. It's only been like 24 hours. So they were kind and just let them out with $1,000.
That is kind. Who was it? Who's the builder?
Elegant Construction LLC, Elegant Construction, Elegant.
Who's that?
Marchnov is the last name, Alla and Edward.
That was really
They
nice.
build in Hickory Hills and
Yeah.
Anthony Park, yeah.
That's really nice. They don't have to, and that's a point. So, no, not all builders are going to that, but don't be surprised to see it in new construction, because if I'm I'm dried in, which is what, when you close in the house and you've got the windows in, you got the roof on, so it's dry now inside. If I'm dried in and you write an offer on a house, I'm taking it off the market. And so I'm really committed to you to finish it, even if it's just I'm finishing exactly like I'm doing it. So I want to do that, I think I want some earnest money and I want it to be non-refundable. I wouldn't, as a builder, I wouldn't hesitate a minute to say that. If they say no, I just say, well, okay. You can go to Oler or Trendsetters or somebody else and buy a house if you want to. But I have to have that because I don't get a chance to sell this to anybody else. Now it's their house. So I've got to go start the next one or finish the next one so I can sell it. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem with the fact when agents say, I know it says non-refundable, but is that right? I mean, I taught English for 10 years. I think non-refundable means you don't get it back. That's my opinion. All right, inspection reports. So here's what happens. You order an inspection and the company's charged $325 to $500 for these reports. We have a document that says, here's inspection providers that you have to get signed off on as part of your deal. You need to learn who the inspectors are because they are different. They're a lot different. And there's some that are good, there's some that are okay, just like agents, So you got to learn who they are. And you really need to talk to other agents, maybe. I heard Lene, who wrote this offer, on the phone yesterday, calling different inspection companies that we've used because her buyer is very cost conscious. And was asking them, could you give me your price and what does that include? You want termite in there in every inspection, you want it, but you don't want to pay for it separately. And Campbell in Springfield will actually do free termite inspections. So anyhow, they're going to do an inspection. It's your job to schedule it, not pay for it. You'll call D2 Inspections and say, hey, my client wants an inspection on this property. When can you do it? And they'll give you a day. So when I'm filling out the section on inspections in the next paragraph on D, I always put 15 days in there because I don't know what the schedule is of the different inspectors. But I need time to get a full inspection, and then I need time to determine what goes on the inspection notice. Now, what C says, what report can you get? What inspections can you do? Anything. Foundation, air quality, radon, roof, soil texture, soil makeup, well, septic, it doesn't matter. You can do any inspection you want. And I tell this story, and I'll try to keep it very brief. I had an inspection one time to determine if there were evil spirits in the house. I swear to God, downtown Springfield. So she got this buyer, said she wanted to do it. And I said, I don't know who to call. She said, I know just the person. So I had called this person. We all met down there and she walked around fluffing her big dress and all that stuff. And she says, I hesitate to tell you, but there are evil spirits throughout this home. I'm like, dang. And I said, well, what do you do to get rid of evil spirits? And she said, you have a seance, prayer sometimes help. I said, well, let's get with it. Let's just do it right here. They said, no. I did not a seance, so, lose a sale over evil spirits. It was the stupidest thing I ever heard. But it's allowed by the contract. So don't be, if somebody asks for that. You also, if you look at the 15 days, if you're doing any rural property, and I say rural, it could be anywhere just outside of Springfield, maybe even in Spring sometime. But if they have a septic, you've got to get the septic covered by the seller. You should write that in your contract. And then you gotta have a well test, the septic inspection. They're not like the regular home inspectors. There's not that many of them, so you gotta get it done. And then, so that's another question to ask the inspector when you're hiring him or your client is do you do septic inspections also? And then you gotta get a well test, and the well test is not that hard. You just get water into a little jar and you put a lid on it and you take it to the county. But they typically don't want you doing it. You might have to at some point, but they don't want you doing it. You gotta take it to the county and then come within 24 hours, it comes back, but all of it's time, right? So I start with 15 days and that's in paragraph D. And then it says if you need a specialist, then you can have an additional 5 days just by contacting the other agent, email, text, whatever, but it's gotta be in writing. You can't do it just a phone call. So I don't care what it is, if I'm running out of time, I'm at day 13 or something, and I don't have the reports all back, I'm sending an email to the agent. Unfortunately, we're gonna need an additional 5 days for our inspection period. I don't say what it's for, I don't say anything. They can't deny it, okay? It says specialist, but it doesn't have to be a specialist. I mean, it could just be the fact that I don't have a specialist report back. Because, okay, now we have all the inspections. Maybe it's just a regular inspection where you just get mechanical, structural, and nothing else. It's on city water, city sewer. And we receive that and your client receives it, okay? Let's see here. Company doesn't want you using dot loops, so don't use it. I just used it for a long time, so I'm old. Okay, so here on the screen now is a copy of an inspection report. And like I said, so these guys get $325 to $500, $60, whatever, dollars, okay? Okay, there's the first page, there's the next page, which, you know, blah, 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 legal stuff, you know, you can't sue me. And then it goes on, it's still going on here. And then we finally get the table of contents, and we're still doing stuff that doesn't mean anything. But you're paying them that money though, see, $450, so they gotta have a lot of pages. And there's the scope of the inspection, and now we get to, there we are. We're finally to the instruction, to the inspection itself. You get the inspection report, they get the inspection report. The longer you're in the business, the easier this will be for you. What you should do, I don't care what your background is you should read through the report, and basically, if it concerns you, it probably concerns your buyer, doesn't it? Like this, here's a vertical crack, or not, yeah, not strictly vertical. But they observed some cracking in the foundation. You see the one on the left, and you see the one on the right, which is tiny. I mean, maybe your buyer says, you know what, I really want a specialist to look at that. That's why you have the additional time. So you write that down. But I go through the entire report just to see how I feel about it. I actually print it off physically so I can do pages. You're not going to do that because you're young, you know, but I do that. And then once I've got a good feel for it, I call the client or contact them by email and say, hey, you know, let's set up a time so we can talk about this. I really like to go face to face and sit down with them, but they don't like, people don't do that as much anymore. They want to talk to me on the phone about it. And maybe they say, hey, I really think we ought to have a specialist look at this, or, you know, could you have somebody look at the roof or whatever it might be? Yeah, I can do that. It's a buyer's responsibility to do all the inspections, not the seller's. So you don't tell the seller, hey, you know, they called out a problem on the roof. Could you get a roofer over there to look at it? No, that's your job. I mean, buyer's job. That's what the contract says. So anyhow, I mean, put this on, what happened there?
I have a question about that. So
Yeah,
When we personally have bought homes, our agent would have us meet while the inspector, like at the very end, and let the inspector go over the stuff with us. Is that okay to do?
Sure. I had a client recently, and what the inspector wants before you get there late at the end of the
Right, after the
inspection.
end.
Yeah, no, that's certainly fine.
But if they can't meet or do something like that, then you would just forward them the report. after-
Well, they get it sent to them because they're the ones who pay for it, so they get it
So they don't
first.
know.
They copy us on it though.
Okay.
And then what I do, and again, I want you to think about this, I think you should do it, is as soon as I get the inspection report, I send it to the other agent. Because I want them looking at the same thing I'm looking at. Because it's got 40 items on here that could be addressed in this inspection report. But we're gonna only ask for 10. Okay? I want them to see that I could have asked for more, but I didn't. I asked for this. And so when we send the inspection notice, which is the next part of this, and I'll get back over here. The inspection notice on Forest after we do the inspection, then they can see I didn't ask for everything, but I asked for things that really concern my contract. I mean, my client. That's what I'm asking for. Get back there where we were.
And you said you call the inspector,
I call the inspector
you don't have the client, the buyer call.
and I give the inspector all the information, my client's information. I want to get it set up. I don't want to put that responsibility on my client because I don't think
You're worried about. the-
time is of the
Okay.
essence. So I get it set up and then I call my client and say, okay, I've got an inspection scheduled for Thursday at 10 o'clock. They're gonna be contacting you to let you know. Well, they're contacting them not to let them know. What are they doing? They're getting mud, but hey, they wanna get they charge everybody up front on these things now, or they get their credit card information. So that's why you call and set it up, but they call them or email them and say, they want what they want is their information. And then they put it all over the report too. Let's see. Okay? All right, so we come up with an inspection notice, and here's what an inspection, just write this down if you're writing anything down. Seller to repair or replace on your little note there. That's how your inspection notice should read when you send a notice to somebody. Seller to repair or replace. We've had this, when you saw I just showed you that one page of the inspection report and had the crack. Seller to have qualified contractor. Repair foundation per the inspection report, and I go on and put 10.4-3 or whatever it is in there. You go into the bathroom, the exhaust fan's not working. Seller to replace the exhaust fan in the main bathroom, and you can add seller to have qualified contractor. Now, don't put licensed professional in there. Unless like maybe it's a serious electrical issue, because I can change a light switch. And most qualified contractors can change a light switch. So you don't need a licensed professional to do that, right? Do you understand what I'm saying here? Because I have agents, new agents especially, that put licensed plumber to repair the drain leak. And it's really not necessary, it's something that the seller could do, it's not tightened properly or whatever. But qualified contractor is a term that I think you need to learn to use, because I think it covers a lot. There are qualified contractors that you could call that can go out there and fix a lot of these items in inspections, okay? All right, process again. Write the contract, we go under contract, we immediately make contact with the title company with our contract, and then we contact the inspector is really our next call. We call the inspector, and then once the inspector, we get him set up, and after the inspector's set up, we have our inspection. They send us a copy of the report, we get with our buyer says, here's the items I want addressed. I type it up in an email and say, look at this and see if it says what you want it to say. They say, yes, I put it on a notice, send it to them, signatures, and then immediately send it over. I have to have it done within that time period. If I don't, then I'm a bad buyer's agent and I may be responsible for those repairs. Doesn't sound like much unless it's a roof.
So you email the seller's agent the things that you want repaired or replaced, but there's no formal document for that.
Well, there is a formal
Oh,
document,
Okay.
the inspection notice.
Okay.
I will show you that form. You may not make it through the whole contract. I think there's another class coming in there. I apologize. Okay, so if you look here, here is the inspection notice. And it says here, if you look at line 7, part A, seller hereby responds as follows. Oh, no, that's the inspection notice response. I'm sorry. Let's see if the inspection notice is on there. Yeah. Here's the inspection notice, and you can look at the difference between the two. Seller replaced roof shingles. They wanted a whole roof. Blah, 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 blah. Now, this is an agent out in Willard. He's been around for a long time, but see, he doesn't write that anything like I would. I would have had seller to have qualified roofing company replace roof shingles. Seller to have qualified contractor replace the AC capacitor for condenser. I mean, I'm going to kind of specify what I want there. All right. Now, so we didn't accept this. My seller didn't. Look, I represented the seller here, so we've changed hats here. So I want you to look at what he responded. Seller will repair and replace items 2, 4, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then one of the things they asked for was a shutoff valve on the water heater gas line and the furnace gas line. And I thought they just had those replaced 2 years ago, the seller did. So I went down there and looked, and they both had shutoffs on them. So I just took pictures of them and sent them to the other agent and the buyer. And just said, look, there's shutoffs on there. We're not going to put new ones in there. And there's no double stop in the kitchen sink, just 2 typical drains, because he wanted a double stop. I don't even know what that is. And it had 2 drains. So I've never heard of a double stop. My client had either, and we've both been in construction for quite a while. So we just sent back and said, no, we're not doing that one, but we'll fix the other things. So in other words, and here's where it gets tricky. So I send over, I send over my inspection notice to the seller, and the seller says, I'm not fixing that. I'll do 2 of the 10 items. And then I send back, after I get that, my client looks at it and goes, no, I want these. I send over an inspection notice response, which is what this is, and say, I'll do 8 of the 10, but I'm not doing all 10. Or I want 8 of the 10. I'll accept that you're not going to do these 2. We have 10 days. It's called the resolution period to resolve our differences, to come to a written agreement. So we can do this inspection notice dance back and forth all the way to the 10th day. But if we don't reach a written agreement, either my buyer's buying the house as is, or the contract is automatically terminated. So why is time is of the essence? We have 15 days in the inspection period, right? Yes. Everybody agree? Okay. We go to the 14th day before we send the inspection notice, but we've got to send it. We send the notice, now there's 10 days. By the time we reach an agreement, we may be 25 days into the contract. That's why you need that time, and that's why time is of the essence. So just understand that it's not a, when I put 15 in there, I might need all 15. Contract's contract, right? Let's go to this one while we're here. Okay, so inspection notice, maybe inspection response. We get an agreement. We're moving to closing, but the agreement has to be in writing. That's the resolution period that they talk about on E. Don't pay any attention to the capitulation right now because you won't understand it. Okay? Now it goes fast. We have no, we're on page 4 now, right? We have no municipal or government inspections. So you can skip all that. Line 202 down to 221. You don't have any liability unless you're the one paying for the inspections and hiring, actually physically hiring and paying for the inspectors or the engineers or whoever it is. It says the broker has no liability. You and me are the same people, okay? So I got to remember, under Missouri law, brokers are immune from liability for statements made by somebody else that you didn't hire. That's G. So you don't go out there and say, you need a new roof. I mean, you're not a professional, unless you are a roofer or a plumber, you could do that, but don't do it unless you're qualified in some way. In this one on 223, home warranty, everybody should get a home warranty, but most people don't. Buyer acknowledges seller's not providing one, but one of these 3 boxes has to be checked. Home warranties cost about $600. They primarily cover the major appliances, what they do. If your seller asks for one, or your buyer asks for one, great. It's just part of the negotiation. But remember, they are somewhere between $500 and $600. They're not cheap. And it will cover them though for a year, which is not a bad idea. On earnest money, here's why most brokers don't like it. Somebody puts down earnest money and then we go through the inspections, the contract falls apart. Buyer goes, look, you wouldn't do what I asked for. I want my earnest money back. And the seller goes, I'm not signing, because you got to have 2 signatures to release the earnest money. You have a mutual release of earnest money and both parties have to sign to dispose of that earnest money. And so they fight about it. We don't have an escrow account, thank God. Now it's the title company's responsibility to release it. But I guarantee the buyer is going to think it's your fault if he can't get his earnest money back. And what you have to say is, look at paragraph 8. It's not my responsibility. The title company will have to have a mutual release. Well, let's put one together. So you put one together, you send it to the seller, and the seller ignores it. Nothing you can do about it. There's really is nothing you can do about it. You can ask and beg and plead. They do not have to sign. In fact, if you wait, it can go all the way for 365 days, and then they send it to the state treasurer's office. And it goes into unclaimed funds. You know how to get out of there? You send them a notarized letter signed by both parties to the contract to say, we've reached a decision, please release the earnest money. You know where they release it to? The title company. You know what you got to have to get out of the title company? A signed earnest money document signed by both parties. I mean, it's just a mess. So somebody puts down $10,000 and somebody disputes that, that's what you go through. Now you can file with the title company what's called an interpleader agreement. It costs about $500 to $1,000 to file it. You go before a judge, you argue your case, the buyer and the seller, and the judge makes a decision right there. For $500, it's a bad idea. For $1,000, still probably a bad idea. $10,000, I'd do that rather than have it go get an attorney. I just represent myself and say, here's the reason I deserve the earnest money back. And seller goes, no, you don't deserve it because of this. And we provide them with the documents. The judge makes a decision. But that's just me. All right, paragraph 9, loss and condemnation. We have tornadoes. And so a house could be knocked over by a tornado. If your buyer's under contract on that house, they can accept a check for the amount of the contract paid by the insurance company, or they can terminate the contract without penalty. Fire, same thing. Tree falls on the house gets condemned, same thing. If the seller agrees to repair it back to the state it was when they wrote the contract, they can go forward, or they can terminate the contract without penalty. On closing costs, it goes on and on and on from line 271 all the way down to 301. all you need to look at is line 300 on closing costs. That $4,000 on page 1 of that contract says any other expenses or fees associated with closing, all is approved by the buyer's lender. The lender's going to say where that $4,000 in concession goes, and the closing costs other than that are split or prorated between the buyer and the seller. So for example, my taxes are $1,200 a year. I close June 1st, June 30th, then the buyer is responsible for the taxes for the whole year, but I'm giving them a credit for the first 6 months. Now, in real estate school, they made you go through all these machinations, figuring interest and all this. That's not your job. Don't ever do it. That's a title company's job. Don't even make an attempt at it. If the lender, if your buyer says something about, what my payment's gonna be or whatever, you go. And hand them the phone. That's not your job. Do not do that. You're putting yourself some risk out there, some liability. So you do not prorate anything, and the lender gets to make the final decision. So if you put $4,000 on concessions on page 1, the lender's going to try to take every bit of that $4,000. That's fine, because the seller's already agreed to it. But it won't include like the seller's closing costs or anything like that. It won't include the home warranty. Won't include any of that stuff. It'll just be really things related to the loan. This is a binding contract. You kind of get that so far? If both parties sign it, it's a binding contract, and it can be enforced by state and federal laws and local laws if there are some. On assignability, that means that, so you and I, working together, and I enter into a contract with you, you're my representative, and all of a sudden I get transferred. I'm with O'Reilly, and they buy a store in Alaska or something. I'm like, man, I want to go to Alaska. So I get transferred. I'm still under contract. I call you and I say, hey, I don't know what to do, and you say, you know what? I think I'll buy that house. I'm just going to put it in my rental portfolio. All I've got to do is use an amendment, and the amendment says it's a 1-page document. All parties agree. The buyer is now you. That's it. We all sign it. And all she has to do is go to closing. That's simple. You see this used a lot with straw buyers. So let's say O'Reilly wants to buy a little house for their cousin, niece, nephew, uncle. If they see O'Reilly on the contract, sometimes people go, get a little more money out of that guy, And so straw buyers use it. I once bought a winery in Mount Vernon for the guy that owned KTXR. Right before closing, I assigned it back to him, but they wouldn't sell it to him for some reason. They didn't like him. He's kind of a different guy, I guess. But I bought it for him. So you understand that's pretty simple, actually. 1031 exchange. This has to do with avoiding taxes, pushing them forward into the future. It's called a stalker exchange is what it's called. But what you do is I buy this duplex in Ozark for $100,000, and now the market goes nuts like it did, and now it's worth $200,000. And so I sell it, and I've got $100,000, let's just say, of net profit. The federal and state government's going to tax me at 21%. They want $21,000 of my $100,000 just because the market got better. Not right, not fair, is it? So the way to avoid that is to take my $100,000 in profit that I sold this for, and then buy something else of equal value that's considered an investment property. Well, raw land's an investment property if you put a tractor on it or a cow or a goat or anything like that, or you cut hay on it. That's an investment property. Or I sell my duplex and buy a restaurant, or I buy a retail store. I buy a candle shop. It doesn't matter. It's an investment. And they're not really pushy on that. I want you to understand that 1031 exchanges, they really don't care as long as it's considered an investment property. It says like kind exchange. And so people freak out about that. I'm selling a farm, now I got to buy another farm. No, I'm selling a farm, I'm going to buy storage units, right? And it just has to be equal or greater value, and you avoid all the taxes. Or if it's less, you can pay some of the difference, which is fine. But nobody wants to pay 21% taxes on profit that they made. I open a restaurant and I build it up, and it's a great, and I sell it.
And because I've done a great job, they get 21%. So if you get into that situation, all of you, call me. We'll do a 1031 exchange on something. It's a lot better for you long term. Anyhow, the contract allows it. All right. If you include a document in the contract, the offer, or if it becomes a document, somebody signs or initials it, that's the entire agreement. The lawyers say it's the 8 pages of the contract, the 4 corners of the 8 pages, that's crap. If you get sued, they're gonna ask for every document. That's the entire agreement. So if you have disclosures, that's part of the agreement. If you have the CRS tax data, that's part of the agreement. If you have a survey, that's part of the agreement. So just remember that. It's the whole thing. It's not what the attorneys at the state level say. All right, paragraph 13, nobody wants to see that, but if a seller or buyer decides they're not going to buy a property after it's under contract, try to guide them to the end. So your buyer comes to you, you're a week out from closing, says, you know what? I've just decided I'm not going to buy the house. He would be in default if there's no legal reason for him to leave. Now, your case, the tragedy deal, that's not a legal excuse. This contract is for all heirs and assigns or managers of trusts and estates. It goes forward. So you can die in a car wreck, doesn't do any good. The contract moves forward unless they decide to terminate it out of the goodness of their heart. But if a buyer just comes to you and says, I'm terminating the contract, yeah, I'm not closing. You need to say to them, you know what? Unless you have a legal reason, I want you to look at paragraph 13, and you probably ought to talk to an attorney. But I've got a better idea. Here's your better idea. You close on it. I don't care if you move into it or not. I'll put it back on the market tomorrow and I won't charge you anything on the list side. Got to pay a buyer's agent. And that could be me, but you got to pay somebody to bring a buyer. And since we've got a new roof and a new furnace and all that, let's raise the price 5%. That'll cover your costs on it, but I'll do it and we'll try to get it sold and maybe you won't be out anything. Because if you go to an attorney, you're going to have a minimum, I'm guessing 5,000, but it could be less than that, of a retainer. And then it's going to be 18 to 24 months to solve the case. That's the last one we did was 18 months. So you want to do that, Mr. Buyer? Because they have the right, it says it right there, that they can specifically enforce this contract. Now, I could go to the seller, the option 2, and say, look, we want to terminate the contract. Here's his reasoning, and we're willing to pay you your damages. How much damages do you think you have? Well, I've been off the market for 45 days and I've made $1,000 worth of repairs and I could have sold it 3 times. So I want $3,000. So I go back to the buyer and the buyer says, I'll give him 2. I go back to the agent, seller, and he says, I'll take the 2. We write it up in a mutual release. And I give him $2,000 and we're gone. And that's less painful than going through an attorney. Number 3 on both of these paragraphs is the same. Pursue any other remedy and damages available, anything. We don't want that one either, right? So if the seller defaults or the buyer defaults, either one, it's a bad deal and you need to have a conversation with them. And then if they still like, no, I'm not closing, you say, you know what, you need to consult a real estate attorney. And I'm going to let the other agent know what you're doing, what you've decided to do. But the best option is on the buyer side, close, I'll sell it. Keller Williams will not charge you anything on the list side. Because we want to avoid litigation just like you do. They might throw your name in there is the problem. If they throw your name, that's my name. And then the company's E&O gets involved. You don't want that. Skip 14 because it doesn't apply in Missouri. It says it does, but it doesn't. I've been through too many cases where you can't collect your own attorney's fees. 15A, B, and C, if you're listing a property, make sure you get the disclosures up. I mean, they'll find you. They won't even let you turn on a listing without a lead-based paint if it needs one. But get them up immediately because look at option B. If you don't have the disclosures up, seller agrees to provide a seller disclosure statement within 1 day if none stated.
And then the buyer has 3 days to review it. And at any time in that 3 days, they can terminate the contract. I would like to go to your seller that you've listed and told them how good you were and say, well, I forgot to put the disclosure on there. When I sent it to them after they wrote the offer, they've terminated the contract. Sorry, we're just going back on the market, Chandler Drive. She'd kill me, wouldn't she? Or no seller's disclosure statement would be provided. You don't have to do a seller's disclosure in Missouri, but those 4 items on page 1 of the disclosure are required by statute. Lead-based paint, meth, dumps, and then hazardous materials. Walkthroughs, look, the only reason you do a walkthrough is to see that the house is essentially in the same condition or the repairs have been made. If you do one too early, the people may be still occupying the house. If you do one too late, which most agents try to do at the day of closing, and I get it, you might not have time to correct anything, you know? So there's kind of a happy medium, but worst case scenario, you should probably do one at least the day of closing, at least stop back by the house and at least just trot through it. That's my opinion. And if your clients can't go, you know, maybe video, or what do you call it? FaceTime. But if you find a problem when you do your walkthrough, picture, send it to the other agent, text the other agent, and then call them. So we've got to have this corrected immediately. Signatures, look, it's just saying in this paragraph, we can do them electronically. We're on paragraph 18. We can do them electronically, or we can wet sign them, or we can do one person can wet sign and one person can electronically sign. Governing law, this is just legalese. Look, a buyer could be 6 people, right, in the contract, or a seller could be 6 people. That's all that is. Notices on 20, no hugs and kisses, handshakes, everything in writing if you're going to give notice. And the notice is effective upon sending. So don't, you know, get a counter in from somebody, you're the buyer's agent, and you take it to your client, he wet signs it, and then you go to dinner, and then you go to church the next morning, and then you go play with your kids, and then you send it over, and the other agent calls and says, hey, I got another offer, we've accepted it. You know, that counter is no longer valid. You go, they signed it yesterday. It wasn't effective, it didn't exist. But as soon as you'll put it in that scanner and put it in your email, push send, worst case scenario, picture, send it to them. But as soon as it's sent, it's considered received. That's when it's effective. On the riders, you can see on this one, we had a government loan rider and no other contingencies or anything else. And then on 396, it says the contract is designed for use in connection with completed construction. It's not really any good for new construction. Really what you're doing when you write this contract on new construction is you're establishing the price and maybe a timeline. And then you go to the builder, which you did on yours, and you say all of these, you know, here's the roof I want, the brick I want, and all that. Everybody signs it, and then you move forward from there. It becomes a part of the contract. I'm doing, what time's your class, 3:30?
Oh, I'm not teaching. Somebody else teaching?
I don't know, I think there may be. Somebody's got a class next
There's supposed to be one at 3.
at 3?
I thought it was the one, didn't they say yesterday they moved? Or Tuesday at the meeting, I
I
thought
don't
someone said they were gonna move it.
We're gonna save just a few more minutes until we get done if nobody shows up.
I was just trying to interrupt you, Jim.
Huh?
I was just trying to interrupt you. No.
Oh, you did good. So again, new construction, really, this is where you sit down with the builder. Now, I would write in special agreements that the buyer and the builder and the agent, buyer's agent, to meet within X number of days to make selections regarding all finishes and exterior materials and so on. And then you have that meeting, you sit down and everybody initials and dates. I'm getting a green roof and it's Corning, and I'm getting a brick exterior and it's this brick, and I'm getting 4 posts on the front porch and whatever it might be. I think you've got to be very specific in that, but you can't do that in this contract. There's no space for that. And this list on these new constructions may be 2 pages long, you're right? It may have 50 items on it because you get tile, the kind of carpet, the countertops, the drawer pulls, maybe, right? Light fixtures and on and on and on.
Would that just be in like a Word document or do you
Yeah.
have a special doc? Okay. so just-
Most of the builders have it.
Okay.
And so, but here's the deal, if the builders have it and there's no place to initial and date or sign and date, then you just add it.
Okay.
And you get the builder to sign it too. I don't care if the other agent signs it because they're not a party to the contract, but you definitely want the buyer and the buyer and the seller to agree to all these items. If you don't, you're gonna get burned on new construction. You have to be careful. And then what's your job on new construction? Okay, if it's dried in, that's easy. You just come to, if your people are not looking at it, and it's your job to go in, kind of make sure things are moving along, staying in contact with the other agent. If it's in the dirt, then there's got to be, when are you pouring the foundation? When are you gonna frame it? I mean, you've got to know those things, so. New construction is a little bit, to me, is a little harder. The rewards are greater, and you get a brand new house, but it's a little harder. Okay, 23, talks about if you have an interest in this property. So as an agent, I still sometimes buy properties to remodel or flip, they call it, but I like remodel better. It sounds good, doesn't it? So if you have an interest in it, then you've got to tell them, because the MRAC says, you know what? It's not fair if you don't tell them that you're an agent. Also, if you're representing a family member, how far out does that go? As far as you want it to go, because I put everything down there. Brother-in-law, ex-brother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law. I don't have any of those, but if I had them, I would put it in there. So that would be an immediate family member, 410, and then out there specify buyer, and then specify ex-brother-in-law. I mean, I don't want any chance that the MRAC is gonna go, hey, you should have told her that. And then what's their source of compensation? Typically, the seller pays a commission. Now, if you're getting an admin fee or a separate fee from your buyer, which most buyer's agents do now, they charge a separate fee because, look, you're up at, if you're like me, you're up at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock sometimes looking at property, see if there's anything new on there for your buyer because you've been looking so hard. And then the first thing you get up in the morning before the kids get up, you're back on the damn computer again. And then maybe you drive to see where it's at. I mean, you've got expenses. So if you charge a separate fee, which most agents do now, buyer's agents, I don't care what it is. As long as you tell the buyer, this fee is for the work I do prior to getting paid commission. And then when I pay my commission by the seller, it goes to the brokerage, and then the brokerage takes their part, and then I get mine.
So you're saying you get a separate fee as a buyer's agent, that's not the 3% commission?
Yeah,
You
and
would
there's two
charge
blanks on
them.
the contract. On the buyer's agency, when you see the employment of buyer by employment of agent or agent by buyer, it'll have two blanks there. One will be a blank for a fee, one will be a percentage. And so most people charge 6%. You can actually charge any percent you want. You can charge 7 or 8. Doesn't matter. It's just what you want to do. Or if you're a buyer's agent, what I do sometimes is I just write the blank BAF, which is buyer's agent fee, and I'll take whatever they offer on the MLS. But there's another blank that says blank, how much do you charge this fee, and when is it to be paid? You can have it paid upfront, cut you a check, or you can have it paid at closing, or it's not applicable. That's the third choice. So the average, we used to charge $150. The average now, I say, is $250. And Janet Parsons, friend of mine over at Remax, she's been charging $495 for 25 years.
On top of her 3% commission.
On top of the commission that she receives.
That
Pictures and things like that.
I mean, you've got to understand that you're working really hard and you don't always get paid for working really hard. You get paid really well when things work out. So you can make, if you can make 6 figures in this business easier than any other business. But you do a lot of work. You just don't know it yet, depending on how much work, how much you've done already. But there's a lot of work involved, and especially when the market goes like this, you're going to have to generate leads. You're not getting paid the whole time you're generating leads, but you've got to.
and you're sitting in an open house on Sunday when you'd rather be with your family, you know, you're trying to lead generate there, but you're not getting paid for it. The only time you get paid is if it closes. You can get it all the way to a closing. So, and the difference is that money you charge, say it's $250, there's no commission split taken out of that. The commission split is taken out of the commission. That $250 goes to you. So that's real money, right? And I mean, don't be ashamed of it if you want to charge that, because you're going to do a lot of that work. I mean, I've been working with these clients and they're great people for 8 months, looking for them a property. 8 months. And I ain't got paid anything yet. My red truck gets 13.9 miles to a gallon, regardless of what the gas price is. So, you know, I spent a lot of money and a lot of time, and I look, I don't go to bed without looking to see if something new came on the market. Because they're hard to please. They want 6 to, could be anything, 50 acres. But they want a nice house and they'd like to have barns and fencing. His daughter raises pygmy goats. I found a lot of nice houses. I found some great barns. Just can't put the two together. And they got to be within 25 minutes or want to be within 25 minutes of Springfield. You'd think that'd be easy, right? Up to $1 million. It ain't out there. If you find it, you come, I'll pay you a referral. Not 25%. I'll just give you some money.
Well, it doesn't cost that much to build a small barn to house goats. They
I
could buy
said the
the
same
house with the
thing.
land easy.
Found the perfect
And then
house
build
for them
a
off
damn
of
barn.
AA.
They could
And
build a good barn for 12 grand or less.
Well, especially goats. I found the perfect house for them in, off of AA at Nixon's on 20 acres. 895,000. It'd been new roof. Huge. 7,000 square feet. The mom's 81. The daughter's, I don't know, 40 to 50. I don't know. Women's ages are hard for me. But I talked them out of it. I didn't talk them out of it. I just said, as a professional, what are you going to do with that third level? You know, because the daughter's going to live downstairs. It's got a full kitchen and 2 bedrooms and everything you need. And the mom's going to live on the main level, really elegant, great kitchen, all this. I said, who's going to live up there in the other 4 bedrooms? I said, I'd love to see you buy it, but bad idea. I should have just kept my mouth shut, right? Right? No, that's not right. It wouldn't be the right thing to do. Of course, they'd probably figure it out within about 6 months and call me back to sell it. I probably messed up there. Not really. All right, so sources of broker's compensation, don't forget. So you know you're getting it from the seller probably because it's on the MLS detail sheet. But maybe you're getting it from your buyer too, and it'll come off their side. The buyer will actually pay that if you charge a fee. It'll just be rolled into their loan, so don't freak out about that. But you need to figure out whether you want to charge that or not, and talk to any of the agents, because I don't know anybody that doesn't charge it. Except me. But I'm just old. Brokerage relationship, down here underneath it says the licensee assisting. Notice it doesn't say representing, assisting the buyer or assisting the seller. Or in this case, I'm on the right-hand side of this. And so I'm a seller's limited agent and a designated agent. You always will be if you have a client agreement. If you have an agency agreement with your client, then whatever side you're assisting, you're going to be a designated agent also. Okay? On the other side, this is a C21 agent. They don't practice designated agency, so he's just representing the buyer as a buyer's limited agent. And you just came out of school, so you understand agency better than I do, right? Don't nod your head. You do not. Nah, just kidding. Here's the deal. So as an example, you've got a listing, all right? You've got it, you're having an open house, and a buyer walks in and says, whoop, I want to buy this. Can you write this up for me? First question is what? Are you working with another agent? Nope. I just want to buy this house. Well, I can help you. You need to understand, I represent the seller, but I can assist you through the whole process. So I would be a seller's limited agent and a designated agent for my seller. And then on the other side, in this example, I would be a seller's limited agent. Because I'm still working for the seller, right? But I'm assisting the buyer. I don't have an agency relationship. I don't know this guy from the Adam and Eve. I don't have a clue who he is, right? That's easy, isn't it? Our agents have so much trouble with this. They want to be dual agents. You don't even know the person. How can you be a dual agent? You don't have a written contract with them, right? That's how you create agency. It says on the Missouri Broker Disclosure Form, if you want representation in the state of Missouri, then you must enter into a contract. So if somebody walks into the house, you don't have a contract with them, you don't know them from Adam and Eve. Now you could ask them, do you want representation? But then you become a dual agent, right? If they want to sign a contract with you. But you just don't assume that you're a dual agent because they walk in and want to write the contract and you write the contract. Good, right? And then transaction broker, that thing, ignore it. We don't like it. Even though we offer it at Keller Williams, it means that you have arm's length representation and that you're not advising either client. Ride around in a car with somebody for 8 months. You know everything about them financially, you know their whole history. You can't do it. That's not transaction brokerage. You've got some responsibility.
Wasn't dual agents going away?
No.
That's what they said at the GSBOR.
Yeah, well, I would rather be a dual agent on every transaction or work with both the seller and the buyer, and it's not about the money. I wouldn't have to deal with the other agent. You know, I mean, no offense to the agents, but I know what I'm thinking, and this is what I've told my clients before. I said, you know, if I'm sitting across from them at a table, they just say, you know, if I have the opportunity, I will assist the buyer, or if I have a contract with a buyer that I can bring to this house, I will. I said, that's the best thing that ever happened to you because I know what I'm thinking. I don't know what that other, I'll call him on the phone and say, hey, we need an extension on the repairs. He'll call the seller and go, that idiot asked for another 5 days. Can you believe that? What a dumbass, you know? That's, you know, those are the conversations they're having on the other side that you can't control. Where if I called the seller, I would say, look, we're gonna have an extension. Here's the reason. You know, they've looked at the roof and there's some granular loss and we're gonna have a roofer get up there and look at it. You know, we'll just deal with it once it happens. But I'm not gonna alarm anybody or freak them out or call somebody stupid. But I don't know what the other agent's telling the other client. But you still don't have to have dual agency to do that. The dual agency means, it really does mean, I have a contract with the seller. It's in writing. It should be at the brokerage. It isn't. In the, what do you call it? The atmosphere. Ether. The cloud, that's it. But then I meet another client who said, find a property. And I say, but you want representation? They say, yeah. I say, okay, there's a Missouri Broker Disclosure Form. Here's a contract for signing. You know, I'm working for you now, you know. And I go out and I introduce him to this property because it turns out he's a perfect fit. Since I have a contract with both of them, I truly am a dual agent. Attorneys hate it because they're used to fighting one side or the other. But for agency and real estate, it can be really good. The only part that I don't like is when the buyer makes an offer. Because I'm representing the seller and I'm representing the buyer too in dual agency, and the buyer says, I'm ready to write an offer. What do you think I should offer? I said, well, I can do a CMA for you, but you know, I really can't guide you on that because of my representation, dual representation. And so they kind of deal with it. But after that, the rest of it's smooth as silk, you know?
Yeah, well, because his reasoning was because you can't equally and truly represent both parties neutrally.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think it, and I've been in it 26 years, 27 maybe. I've done hundreds. But to say that I was in perfect alignment with both parties or represented them equally, I would doubt that's ever true. You know, I may have. You hope to, you do your best. But remember what the goal is. Seller wants to sell, buyer wants to buy. What's my job? get that to closing. That's what my job is. So, I mean, you could be you could be just representing the seller and still have problems, because I have one down to one time in my life that I had a client mad at me. I mean, really mad. Highlandville, when he bought the house, he put a new roof on it. He cut out, it had radon systems on both ends of the house, sucking the radon gas out. You've heard of radon? Look it up. Anyhow, he cut them off and put the new roof on. They do the inspection. They say, hey, your radon systems are gonna have to go back through the roof because they can't function. If they don't, they're just blowing that radon up in the attic. This guy says, I'm not doing it. I said, that's fine, but they can terminate the contract. He just got mad, hell at me, and was just angry at me. So eventually he put him back through, got it done, but he came to the closing table, a Titan table, would not speak to me. And I go to every closing. I'm never gonna miss a closing, but he would not speak to me. Wouldn't say a word to me in the lobby, wouldn't say a word after it was done, wouldn't shake my hand, nothing. It's the only guy in 27 years. But I tell you what, I prayed about it and it didn't do any good. He still hated me, you know. I don't know what I did, but I couldn't help that. He cut the damn pipes off, not me. And you can't pump radon if you believe that radon is real. You can't pump it into a house, you can kill people. And these people didn't want to be killed. But, you know, it still was my fault. All right, when you sign, here's my suggestion. As a buyer's agent, you're writing the contract, writing the offer, right? I fill everything out on this side. It says Chris Boland because she does all the business. She's the boss. She's my wife. Really, she just electronically signs everything. On the other side, I fill out all Bill's stuff too. I put all his numbers in there. I can't sign for him, but I fill everything in for him because I don't want it to delay me getting paid 60 days from now if he doesn't have it in there. Let's skip anything important there. We are a franchise on the next page on 26. On 27, we send all the information unless your sellers disagree or your buyers disagree and they want it not disclosed to the MLS. We're trying to establish market value. If we sell a house in Southern Hills for $150 a square foot, the next person, if they sell 7 houses in a row at $150 a square foot, the next house is probably worth at least $150 a square foot if it's in similar condition, correct? That's why we send the data to the board. FERPTA and anti-terrorism. This is not your job. You're not looking for terrorists or anything like that. That's a title company's job, okay? Don't do it. Don't go ask somebody, are you a terrorist because your name's Abdul Abhab or whatever it might be? You can't do that, right?
Go to the bank first and they're, what is it? It's some kind of thing on the credit reports that if they're on some watch list.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the title companies have all of the software now. They're all tied in and they can tell you, you know, you can't assume something. So, you know, you want to get sued, then get sued. It's not going to happen, so don't do it. So that's not your job. Just ignore 28 and 29. Seller represents that it's not a foreign person as described. Buyer represents it's not. You know what I'm saying? It's not your job. Just don't do it. Just ignore that totally. I mean, I'll sell a house to anybody. If they can buy a house, I'll sell it to them, okay? I don't care where they're from, who they are. It matters nothing to me and it shouldn't be you unless somebody tells me that it's not legal. And it's got to be somebody that has value. All right, on the acceptance deadline, this is, you know, when is it going to expire? You know, if there's somebody in the house and you're showing it at 10 o'clock in the morning, they have to leave for you to show it. I think if you get it written up, you can expire it that night, you know. They got a sign in the yard, they want to sell, they had to leave the house. Now, if not, maybe go to 10 o'clock the next morning. But don't give them 48 hours or 72 hours or 96 hours or something like that. That's crazy, okay? I gotta go too.
So sorry.
I gotta go get my boy here in a minute, but I want to finish this. I didn't think I was gonna get to finish. Time is of the essence. We know about that. And here's how they count everything from a day standpoint. If I write this contract today on the 22nd, then it starts counting tomorrow. That's the first day. So if it's 15 days, it's 23 is the first day. We sign, you can see these electronic signatures, and then you can see my people counted. And that's the whole contract. We got through all 8 pages. And we talked about the as-is inspection route a little bit too. Questions? Here's what you can do. My office, I'm in it every day, or you can call me. Just call me, and if you got questions, it doesn't matter what it is, and if I don't answer, I will call you back. And if it's something specific, you can send me a text, and then I'll know exactly what I need to tell you when I get back on there. And I get those all the time. You know, I'm working with an agent, or I'm working with a client, and this and that and all that. It's like, that's easy for me. If I could look at it first, it makes it even easier. Right?
On the inspections on the property data, if you were to put within 0 days, does that make anything else ineffective, or is everything else still applicable?
That makes everything related to property data no longer
Okay, but
conditional.
inspection,
Oh, no, the inspection doesn't change on the data.
not that, just the
Nothing on
data.
the
Okay.
And during the inspection, you might find something related to that. The other thing we're using now that we didn't used to use is a measurement disclaimer document. Because people used to get in trouble about the size of the property and the amount of square footage and so on. And so they started using this measurement disclaimer, and you're gonna have to sign it on every one. And that basically says it's the buyer's job to do the due diligence. So you buy the house, it's got 4,000 square foot per the MLS, you buy it and you end up in your appraisal, it's 3,200 square foot, you've signed a measurement disclaimer.
Question. I don't know if it's a smart one, but I'm just starting out. So we talked earlier, if you're presenting the buyer and you said that you would not overpay for, like, if it's, you know, priced at something and you don't think it's worth that, you wouldn't pay.
Oh,
If they're asking,
me, yeah, I wouldn't pay.
if they're asking you, for example, and you tell them, I don't know what the example was that you gave us, like, I don't know, just for easy numbers, 150. And they're asking for 150, and it's, if you look at the CMA and it's like 140, and you tell them you wouldn't go.
Well, I'm just telling them, no, I'm telling you, I wouldn't pay over.
What would you tell them if they?
I would
asked?
tell them that, look, I think the CMA represents the properties as the true value being 140. In the current market, our inventory is lower than it's ever been, you know, in the past 10 years, you know, off and on. And so that may be the reason it's priced here. And as you know, for example, maybe there were 3 other cars here when we got here. So, you know, if you have a real interest in the property, you may have to pay that. But I just want you to know this is what I think the value is. Now, how can we protect you? We'll put in there that it must appraise. And see, they could write it for 150, and then it could come back with a 140 appraisal if we've got that box checked and we've got the right number of days in there. And then we protected them that way. That's one of our responsibilities, I think.
Okay, so if you give them all that information and say, like you said, there were other people looking at it and someone is willing to overpay.
You just write it
So
up.
the client can't really do anything, like they can't say, well, you told me this one thing, because you're going off of data,
No.
right? Okay,
No, they can't do anything to you. I mean, all you do is you put down what they say, unless you're the one writing the numbers in the contract before they get there. No, if they tell you 160,
well, I was thinking like, they could say, well, you're giving me all this information and you told me that, you know, it's not worth that much and I really wanted the house and someone ended up overpaying. Well, you're going off of data.
well, you don't say it's not worth that much. I mean, I know what you're saying. You wouldn't have that conversation. You just say, you know, I think the true value according to the data. Now, does the data change daily? It did for 2 years in a row. Houses that started out at 140 at the beginning of that 2-year run up ended up being, hell, I sold a 1,200 square foot home for 225,000. Now, who would have thought that ever happened? I've been around a long time, just didn't think it would happen. So, you know, you just tell them, you know, this is from the data that we've got in this subdivision, this is what everything is sold in here. You know, maybe this was nicer.
Yeah. just kind of throw it in there that it might sell for the price. I mean, someone might overpay still despite
Yeah.
what the market is.
I think, the first one I had up there on 218 North Forest, that one was, actually listed 135, or, yeah, 135. So she paid 139. She wrote the offer for 139 with 4,000 in concessions. But you notice she's got 40 days on the appraisal too. Yeah, don't worry about stuff like that. You give them the information, you make your best presentation, and they make the decision, not you. But you might go back and make notes and say, "Yeah, I told them this."
Thank you.
You're welcome, guys. I'm glad you came. You'll be my boy. Yeah.